Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the patch 6.2 level 100 PvE Restoration Shaman guide. My name is Tuskeh, and in this video we are going to discuss the Restoration Shaman in all of its glory, covering everything. This guide is designed for everyone, whether you're a new player wondering what Restoration is like to play, an experienced player looking to get into the Shaman, a veteran of the Shaman class curious about what you can do to go above and beyond, or just a healer looking for some advice. This guide will cover everything you need to know. Remember, this guide will only cover the PvE aspects of the Restoration Shaman. You can use the links at the top of the video to jump to the various sections of this guide at will. Now, let's get started. The Restoration Shaman is the ranged healer of the Shaman specializations. Utilizing primarily water-based healing spells, the Restoration Shaman is, essentially, a hero. Thanks to a powerful mastery that makes their healing spells stronger depending upon how injured their target is, the Restoration Shaman is capable of saving lives when it is most needed. Although lacking some of the versatility of the Restoration Druid, the raw throughput of a Holy Paladin, or the uniqueness of a Discipline Priest, the Restoration Shaman is capable of quickly and consistently saving lives with their quick spells where other classes would be unable to. They make fantastic tank healers, and their largest cooldown spells are some of the strongest available to a raid looking to survive a boss's wrath. Additionally, the Shaman is one of the only classes capable of casting every single one of their spells on the move, on demand, with their Spirit Walker's Grace ability. Not only does the Restoration Shaman bring great single-target and multi-target healing and some extremely potent cooldowns, but as a Shaman they have access to a suite of powerful utility spells that go beyond their role as a healer, transforming them from a pure healing class into a utilitarian spellslinger who can harass enemies with slows, roots and stuns, heal allies and deal damage, all without losing stride and sacrificing one of these aspects for another. Thanks to Grace of Air, a Restoration Shaman brings passive mastery and haste to their entire group or raid team without having to worry about the uptime of buffs. Additionally, through the Shaman's unique and iconic totems, the Restoration Shaman can provide temporary benefits to their allies or debilitate their foes. Totems can do things like redirect harmful spells, remove fear effects from the Shaman's allies, provide free healing, harass enemies with roots and stuns, deal damage, or even summon elemental servitors to deal damage, support your team, and redirect enemy attention. Restoration Shaman are also rather difficult to kill. Not only do they have powerful healing spells that can restore their health very quickly, but they can mitigate damage quite effectively as well. This mitigation can even extend to their allies, dramatically increasing a raid's survivability so that they can keep fighting even while being subjected to the harshest of damage. With a skilled Restoration Shaman in a group, they will be much harder to kill. A Restoration Shaman has a variety of abilities that allow them to effectively heal a single target, such as a tank, and several iconic multiple target healing spells for restoring the health of entire teams. These spells, combined with the Shaman's powerful totems, weave seamlessly together to allow a Shaman to handle just about any situation that World of Warcraft can throw at them. There is never a situation where your raid team will say, "We would be stronger without a Restoration Shaman as one of our healers." It just won't happen, unless your raid team tends to be a little bit silly. Most importantly, the Restoration Shaman is fun to play, with an effective healing rotation combined with frequent use of totems. Depending upon the situation, a Restoration Shaman may be blanketing a raid in light healing, saving lives with quick single-target heals, keeping a tank alive through heavy damage, or going berserk and keeping the entire raid alive through fatal damage. In any of these situations, it's easy to feel like a hero, saving allies from near death with well-timed heals. So, just what spells will you be using as a Restoration Shaman? Before we discuss that, let's quickly go over your Mastery. This is a passive benefit that you gain at level 80, with its potency affected by how much of the Mastery stat you have on your gear. For the Restoration Shaman, Mastery increases the potency of your healing spells dependent upon how low health the target is. If your target is at 90% health, a heal won't be dealing as much healing as if they were on 10% health, where a heal will deal hugely increased healing. So, your abilities. It's important to note that since the Restoration Shaman's most important resource is mana, and running out of mana is a real and dangerous possibility as a healer, every ability's mana cost is important. As we go through this list of spells, any ability that has a mana cost will be labelled as such. And remember that you can have a maximum of 160,000 mana at level 100, regardless of your gear level. That's just the static, default amount. That cannot go up. Let's start with your main healing spells, the ones you'll be using to do your job as a healer. You have Healing Wave, which is a single target healing spell with an average cast time and a mana cost of approximately 3,300. This is a cheap healing spell that won't deplete your mana much, if at all, and it heals for a decent amount. You have Healing Surge, which is another single target healing spell with this time a short cast time and a mana cost of approximately 6,600. This is much more expensive than Healing Wave and heals for the same amount, but with its short cast time it is very useful for quickly saving lives. You have Chain Heal, which is an area of effect healing spell that chains from the first target healed to 3 other targets, for a total of 4 players healed. Although it sounds like it'll jump slowly, all 4 players are healed instantly by the spell. The heal is average, and each time it chains, it heals for slightly less. It has an average cast time and a mana cost of approximately 8,900, making it a very expensive healing tool that's capable of keeping multiple people alive. You have Healing Rain, which is an area of effect healing spell that, after a short cast time, creates an aura of healing rain on the ground. Lasting for 10 seconds, this aura heals 6 allies for a small amount over the duration. It costs approximately 6,900 mana, making it fairly expensive. You have Riptide, which is a single target healing spell that instantly heals the target for a small amount and then a larger amount over 18 seconds. It is instant cast and has a mana cost of approximately 2,300, making it cheap to cast. It has a 5-second cooldown. You have Healing Stream Totem, which is a totem spell that instantly places a healing stream totem into the world, next to your character. This lasts for 15 seconds, and during this time it will automatically heal the lowest health ally within 40 yards for a small amount. It does this every couple of seconds. You have Earth Shield, which is a single target spell that shields the target. Each time they take damage, the Earth Shield heals them for a small amount, although this heal can only trigger once every few seconds. Earth Shield has 10 charges, meaning that it will fall off once it has healed its target 10 times. Additionally, while Earth Shield is active, all of your spells will heal that target for 20% more. Earth Shield can only affect one person at a time, meaning that it is primarily for tanks. It has no cooldown and costs approximately 4,000 mana. Also, it's important to note that a target can only have one shield from you active at any one time, meaning that you can't have Earth Shield and one of your other abilities, Water Shield, active at the same time. Finally, you have Unleash Life, which is an instant cast spell that heals a single target for a small amount and increases the effectiveness of your next direct healing spell by 30%. This means that it will increase the effectiveness of Healing Wave, Healing Surge, Chain Heal, since it's a single target spell that chains, not an area of effect ability, and Riptide, but it will not work with Healing Rain, which is an area of effect spell, or Healing Stream Totem, where the healing technically comes from the totem, not from you. Those are your main healing spells. Next, let's discuss your healing cooldowns, hugely powerful spells that can save entire raids if used at the correct time. First is Ascendance. This transforms you into a Water Ascendant for 15 seconds. During this time, all of your healing done is duplicated. This duplicated healing is spread evenly among all nearby allies, making this spell great for healing through area of effect damage. Ascendance has a 3-minute cooldown and no mana cost. Next is Healing Tide Totem. Just like your Healing Stream Totem, this is a totem placed at your feet that heals nearby allies. However, instead of healing just one ally, the Healing Tide Totem heals all of them within 40 yards for a large amount over its 10-second duration, pulsing every couple of seconds. This is a great spell to help raids through area of effect damage. It has a 3-minute cooldown and costs approximately 1,700 mana. Finally, you have Spirit Link Totem. This is an air totem that is placed at your feet when used, and it lasts for 6 seconds, projecting a 10-yard aura around itself. Any ally that stands within this 10-yard aura takes 10% reduced damage for as long as the aura remains. And more importantly, every second, the Spirit Link Totem will automatically redistribute the health of everyone standing within its aura so that they all have equal percentage health. So, If you had two players standing in the totem, one at 10% health and the other at 100% health, their health would be redistributed so that they both had about 50% health. When used on an entire raid's worth of players, this allows them to survive gigantic amounts of damage by turning each player's health bar into a giant raid-wide health bar. Spirit Link Totem has a 3-minute cooldown and costs approximately 3,500 mana. Finally, you have Bloodlust. This is a spell that all Shaman have, and it is important to note that it is a raid-wide cooldown that, even as a healer, you need to know about. Instant cast, this spell increases the haste of all raid members by 30% for 40 seconds, applying a debuff that prevents Bloodlust or other similar effects, such as a mage's time warp, even though that's not a real Bloodlust effect, from being applied for 10 minutes. This ability decides the outcome of fights, so make sure you use it correctly. It costs 6,800 mana. Those are your big cooldowns. Next, let's discuss some utility spells that help you and your allies or debilitate your enemies. You have Capacitor Totem. This puts down an air totem that lasts for 5 seconds, charging up. After those 5 seconds, it explodes, destroying itself and stunning all nearby enemies for 5 seconds. It's a great stun that takes a bit of finesse to use correctly, and a lot of people have a go at it as a bad spell, but it's still capable of stopping entire swarms of enemies in their tracks. You just have to use it correctly. It has a 45-second cooldown and a mana cost of 1,600. You have Earthbind Totem. This puts down an earth totem that lasts for 20 seconds, where it will repeatedly slow enemies within 10 yards. It has a 30-second cooldown and costs about 1,800 mana. You have Ghost Wolf. This instantly turns you into a spectral wolf, increasing your movement speed by 30%. Any healing spell other than Unleash Life will revert you to your normal form. Actually, just about any spell other than Unleash Life will revert you to your normal form. It costs about 2,300 mana. You have Grounding Totem, which puts down an air totem that lasts for 15 seconds. During this time, it will redirect the first hostile spell cast at any nearby ally. This destroys the Grounding Totem, but the effect will not hit its intended target. Grounding Totem cannot redirect area of effect spells. It has a 25-second cooldown and costs 1,800 mana. You have Hex, which, after a short cast time, turns a humanoid or beast-type enemy into a frog for 1 minute. During this time, they can't do anything, but the Hex can be broken after they take damage. Normally, 1 or 2 spells won't break the Hex, but any more than that and you're looking at an unbroken Hex and a very annoyed enemy. This is a crowd control spell. It has a 45-second cooldown and costs 1,100 mana. You have Purge, which is an instant cast spell that removes 1 beneficial magic effect on an enemy. It's always good to remove enemy buffs. It has no cooldown and costs 5,200 mana. Speaking of buffs, as a healer, you have a Dispel ability. This is called Purify Spirit. It removes all hostile curse and magical effects on an ally, making it invaluable for dealing with nasty debuffs such as the Mark of the Necromancer ability on the Hellfire High Council. Timing is always important with dispelling, and since this ability has an 8-second cooldown, you need to use it smartly. Just note that if the spell can't dispel anything, it resets its cooldown. It costs about 5,200 mana. You have Spirit Walker's Grace. This is a great spell for mobility. When cast, it instantly buffs you for 15 seconds. During these 15 seconds, you can cast any of your shaman spells while moving. It can be cast while in the middle of a spell without interrupting it. It has a 2-minute cooldown and costs 4,500 mana. You have Totemic Recall, which instantly returns your totems to the earth, destroying them. It refunds 25% of the mana cost of each totem destroyed. It has no mana cost and no cooldown. You have Tremor Totem, which places an earth totem down that lasts for 10 seconds. During this 10 seconds, it shakes the ground, removing fear, charm, and sleep effects from allies within 30 yards. This is great when lots of people are getting feared by, say, the Trash After Socrathar the Eternal. It has a 1-minute cooldown and costs 700 mana. You have Water Shield, which is an out-of-combat buff that you will need to have active at all times. When used, it surrounds the shaman with a water shield, increasing mana regeneration by about 300 per 5 seconds. If you're ever hit by an attack, the water shield will grant a burst of about 450 mana, but, like Earth Shield, can only trigger once every few seconds. It has no charges and lasts for 1 hour, so you only ever have to worry about recasting it once every 60 minutes. It has no cooldown, no mana cost, and, as per with Earth Shield, you can only have one shield spell on yourself active at one time. So if you use Earth Shield on yourself, your Water Shield will be dispelled. And if you use Water Shield on yourself while you have Earth Shield up, your Earth Shield will be dispelled. You have Wind Shear, which is an interrupt spell. With a 25-yard range and a 12-second cooldown, it's one of the stronger interrupting abilities. It locks an enemy out of a spell school, so Holy, Shadow, Fire, Frost, Nature, etc., for 3 seconds. It costs about 3,000 mana. Interrupting enemies is always a good idea, most of the time. So those are your utility abilities, but naturally because you're a shaman, you have damaging abilities as well. These are important because they will constitute your downtime, time where you don't have anyone to heal, and extra damage on enemies is always helpful. You have Lightning Bolt, which deals moderate damage after an average cast time. It costs no mana and has no cooldown. You have Chain Lightning, which deals light damage to 3 enemies, like a reverse chain heal. It also has no mana cost and no cooldown. You have Flame Shock, which deals average damage over 30 seconds to a single enemy. It has a 6-second cooldown and no mana cost. And you have Lava Burst, which deals heavy damage, always critically hits, and deals 50% extra damage if the enemy has Flame Shock active on them. Again, this has no mana cost, but does have a cooldown. You have Searing Totem, which is a fire totem that lasts for 1 minute and deals damage to a single target. You also have Fire Elemental Totem, which is a totem with a 5-minute cooldown that summons a fire elemental to kick ass for you. It shares a 1-minute cooldown with your other elemental totems. Your basic rotation will be to Flame Shock, Lava Burst, and Lightning Bolt while Lava Burst is on cooldown. But this will only happen quite rarely, normally at the very start of a fight when damage isn't going out. Now, let's discuss some of your rarely used abilities. Ancestral Spirit, a long cast time spell that resurrects an ally. This can't be used in combat, but it will help when you're not fighting to bring friends back from the dead, so they don't have to run back to their corpse or to the point in the instance where they are needed. Astral Recall, this is a second Hearthstone. It makes it very easy to get about in the world. If you glyph it, it will instead teleport you to either Orgrimmar or Stormwind, depending upon your faction, naturally. It has a 15-minute cooldown. Earth Elemental Totem. This, like the Fire Elemental Totem, summons a totem that summons an elemental to kick butt. Unfortunately, this Earth Elemental hits like a sissy, and is only useful for supporting you by taunting enemies so that they hit it rather than you. It lasts for 1 minute and has a 5-minute cooldown, and shares a 1-minute cooldown with other elemental totems. Farsight. This changes your viewpoint to the targeted location for 1 minute. It can only be used outdoors, unless glyphed, and can be cast multiple times to jump across the world. Just beware that taking damage will not break the spell, so be careful when using it in enemy territory, you don't want to get killed without noticing. Finally, you have Water Walking. This spell lets you walk on water for 10 minutes. If you take damage, the effect is cancelled, but you can mount up and run across water on your mount. It's really cool. Now, let's quickly discuss your passive spells. These are abilities that are active at all times, and they have various effects. You have Grace of Air, which increases the haste and mastery of nearby party and raid members. This is a buff that makes your raid stronger as long as you're alive. You have Purification, which grants you 5% additional mastery from all sources. This means that your mastery will be higher than a lot of other classes, and you'll be prioritizing it as a stat. You have Reincarnation, which allows you to resurrect yourself when you die. Yeah, this is as awesome as it sounds. Although you can only do this once every 30 minutes, you can do it in combat, meaning that you can die and just resurrect yourself as if nothing had happened. You have Resurgence, which causes your direct heal critical hits to refund mana. you gain about 1000 mana from Healing Wave, 800 mana from Healing Surge, Riptide or Unleash Life, and 450 mana from Chain Heal. This means that if a heal critically hits, you'll get some mana back. You have Telluric Currents, which causes your Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, and Flame Shock spells to cost no mana, and deal 100% increased damage. This means that you can hit fairly hard with your spells, and they cost you no mana, which is great. Finally, you have Tidal Waves. This is the only passive that you really need to keep an eye on. Whenever you cast a Riptide or Chain Heal, you gain 2 Tidal Waves. This is a buff that reduces the cast time of your next healing wave by 20%, or increases the critical heal chance of Healing Surge by 30%. The 2 charges last for 15 seconds and are consumed by Healing Wave or Surge. This really makes Healing Wave easy to use with its reduced cast time, and is really great for saving lives with a big crit Healing Surge. So, those are your spells. Now, to finalize this section, let's have a quick look at the Restoration Shaman in action. Okay, so let's talk about Shadow Lord Iskar. This is the example we're going to be using. This is on Mythic difficulty. As you'll notice in the bottom left, those are my raid frames. It's how I'm going to be doing most of my healing. The pull timer has begun. First of all, I have my Earth Shield on 1 tank as we begin. As the fight begins, I use one of my talents, Elemental Blast. I apply a Flame Shock fairly quickly, and then I use a Healing Rain to start healing through the damage that comes out at the start of the fight. Now, Fell Trackham is about to be thrown, which means lots of damage coming out, and here come the Chain Heals. You'll notice while I was waiting for that period of damage, I was using Lava Bursts in order to do a bit of damage. So I'm just healing up the raid here, using my Chain Heals and my Riptides, and now that the raid is at full health, I'm just going to use a few other damaging spells to keep things going. Going to Riptide people that get low if they get hit by fire, and then a bit more raid damage comes out, which means I'm just going to do a little bit of single target healing with Healing Surge in order to get them up to higher health and dispel this debuff that they have, because it drops at 70% health once you heal them up. Now here comes another Fell Trackham wave, which means another Healing Rain goes down. At this point, I'm targeted by a fire, so I use a Chain Heal just to quickly help restore the raid, and then I focus the Chain Heals on myself in order to survive the fire. I stand in it so that it doesn't spread, so that the rest of the raid has room. We continue with the healing, getting a little bit of damage out. I refresh my Flame Shock, throw out my healing stream totem, and I just continue to use Chain Heals and spreading my Riptides around to keep the raid nice and healthy. Now at this point we have just a moment, so I'm just preparing for a little bit of damage, and here we go into the second phase. Now there's a lot of damage requirements here, so I throw out an Elemental Blast as quickly as I can. I reposition in order to prepare for the incoming burst of raid damage, and at this point there isn't too much to do, so I prepare with a Healing Rain, because the raid damage is about to hit in about 3 seconds. And here it comes, the big blast. There we go, the raid takes a chunk of damage. However, another healer used a cooldown, so I'm not too concerned at this point. We also use the legendary healer ring here in order to mitigate some of the damage. So at this point, I'm just spreading Riptides around. I just target an enemy just to make sure, see what's going on. Get another Healing Rain out in preparation for the next blast. There it is. Then I just throw out some more Chain Heals in order to just top the raid back up. Now we're back into phase 1, and there's a very tricky transition coming up. We're going to have a Fell Chakram, and then we are going to transition to the other side of the room. This is where things get very nasty. So here comes the Fell Chakram out, and at this point, in order to facilitate the raid moving across the side of the room, I use a Healing Tide Totem. You can see the numbers popping up there. It essentially replaces me as a healer while I'm moving across the room. And I want to save my Spirit Walker's Grace for moments where I have to move, say, from fire, or I'm getting pushed off of the edge of the room. So at this point, we have a little bit more downtime. I'm pretty confident with what my mana's doing right now. So I'm just using my Healing Stream Totem on cooldown to keep the raid nice and healthy, getting out some Lava Bursts while there's not much damage going on. Everything is nice. I'm preparing for the next Fell Trackham with a Healing Wave, and there we go, just spreading out more Riptides, keeping Riptide on cooldown as much as I possibly can here, and then throwing in some Chain Heals to help get the raid topped up after that Fell Chakram. Now it's important to note that during the next Phase 2, I'm going to have to be in charge of a mechanic of this fight called the Eye of Anzu. It will require me to dispel and also interrupt a target. So I'll be using my... actually, at this point, that Eye of Anzu was incorrect. It's not happening quite yet. Someone jumped the gun a little bit there, but that's just fine. I passed it back to the people who needed it. So at this point, most of the time I'm just healing people up once they get a bit low with healing waves. Here comes another Fell Chakram. I don't get my healing rain down in time that time because I'm using an Elemental Blast instead, which is my fault there, which is a misplay. So we're now in phase 2. I'm going to have to use my Purify Spirit and dispel a bomb. You'll notice that a raid frame will go blue. There it is, right there. And I'm quickly going to dispel that just before it expires. Then I'm going to pass the Eye of Anzu to our tank so that he can interrupt a very nasty spell. Then he passes it back to me. All the time I'm getting my healing rain out here. We've used the healer ring again in order to facilitate more raid healing. I use the Dispel again, and then I'm holding onto the eye so that I can interrupt. Here I use a Spirit Link Totem as everything starts going wrong. There's a lot going on at this point, so I use my survivability cooldowns, standing in the fire, and unfortunately, at this point, things go a little bit wrong. I lose the Eye of Anzu because I held it for too long and I got shadow riposted by the boss. So I quickly run over there using Ghost Wolf, throw it back to the tank so that he can interrupt, and then although we lose a couple of people because of my misplay, I'm able to, with the help of the other healers, stabilize the raid by using lots of my chain heals in order to use a lot of mana and keep the raid alive. So you can still keep people alive when you make misplays like that, and I feel that showing that misplay was very important. Okay, so at this point we're back in phase 1, things are calming down a little bit. I'm using a healing rain again to prepare for the Fell Chakram damage. So here it comes, big burst of damage. And mostly I'm just focusing my chain heals on the melee because they don't tend to have as much protection from these Fell Chakram as the range do. And then as we lose a couple of people there to just some Fell Fire and some wounds there, we just got a little bit behind. And we move over to the side of the room. I get targeted by the Fell Fire again, so I stand in the fire to make sure it doesn't spread, and I throw some heals out on myself. Again, you'll notice just above the raid frames on my unit frame, it's my character name, I have a special thing that's tracking my tidal waves buffs, so it's a good way of making sure I do that. Now, after spending a few seconds drinking, this is a Dranic channeled mana potion that allows me to regenerate some mana in combat. Very important when you're doing mythic progress. At this point, the raid's taking lots and lots of damage, so I'm just chain healing as much as I can, just to try and save as many people as possible, prioritizing the people that have been wounded with this Phantasmal Wounds debuff, and just trying to get the raid back in fighting condition before we enter the final phase 2, where we will be doing things a bit differently. If you've done this fight on normal or heroic, our technique at this point is to move to the very back of the room by the balcony edge, and as ranged, just focus him down and nuke him. So at this point, we've Bloodlusted. I use my Bloodlust ability there, and although I lost someone there, I'm just getting my damage out as much as I can, throwing my Lava Burst out to deal as much damage as I possibly can. Here comes the first Focus Blast. I use a Spirit Link Totem to help mitigate the damage on the ranged group, and then I throw in some chain heals just to try and keep everyone alive. I get my second Healing Tide Totem of the fight out just to help top everyone up before this next Focus Blast comes in. There are a lot of mechanics going on behind us, but right now we're just trying to nuke down Shadow Lord Iskar before the mechanics overwhelm us. Other healers are dealing with other mechanics at this point. My job is just to keep the raiders alive as I can and deal damage to the boss. So you see he's about to die, he flies back down, the melee get on him, and he falls, which is overall a fairly clean kill. Now, it's very important to note that at a couple of points here, I let people die because I was too busy reapplying my Flame Shock or using Lava Burst or something like that. It's important that I do whatever I can to constantly keep the raid alive and identify moments where the raid needs my help as opposed to my damage. So that's just a quick example of what a Restoration Shaman can do on a mythic fight. Now, let's move on. Now, let's go over the changes that have occurred between level 90 and level 100, and with patch 6.2. As you level up from 90 to 98, you gain enhancements to your abilities every 2 levels. We'll go over them in order of their importance, starting with Improved Reincarnation, which increases the health that you reincarnate with by 50%. This means that you'll pop back up at your feet at about 70% health. This is great, as it means that most of the time you can just instantly jump back to your feet mid-fight without worrying too much about what you'll be getting into. Of course, always check to make sure that you won't instantly die after you self-res. Next, Enhanced Unleash. This makes our Unleash life increase our movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds. Very helpful for when you have to move around, so make sure you use Unleash life to increase your movement speed when you have to be moving quickly. As a note, you can use Unleash Life in Ghost Wolf form to increase your movement speed even more, without losing Ghost Wolf, although generally you won't be running around for too long in this form. Next up, improved Riptide, which reduces the cooldown of Riptide by 1 second. Not exactly exciting, but it will let you cast Riptide more often. Finally, improved Chain Heal, which increases the healing of Chain Heal's primary target by 50%. This means that you'll have to think a little bit more about which target starts your Chain Heal, as you don't want that extra healing to go to waste. As for 6.2, there's only one, but a very important change, that has occurred in regards to Chain Heal. Its overall healing has been increased by 25%, but Riptide no longer increases Chain Heal's effectiveness on the primary target by 25%. This overall is a buff, but it's important to note that you don't have to worry about Riptide and Chain Heal as much starting out, but it's still an important interaction, and you'll need to consider it when you're raiding, especially once you get your tier bonuses in your class trinket. But this just cleans up things a little bit. That's it for the changes. I mean it. Now let's move on. Let's talk basic gearing now. First and foremost, as a shaman, you wear mail armor and you gain a 5% intellect bonus for doing so. Cloth, leather, and plate are a no-go, and you should not wear them. A slightly better piece of gear does not make up for the loss of 5% of your primary stat. This doesn't apply to characters still leveling up, but once you get past level 90, this is the mindset you should stick with. Mail is best. Mail is king. Nothing but mail. Okay? Good. Now, before we get into your stat priorities, it's important to remember that Reforging, a system that dominated Mists of Pandaria's gear, is no longer in the game, and as such you can only customize your gear with gems and enchants. Additionally, a new gear system has been put in place. All primary pieces of gear that shows up on your character, so head, shoulders, chest, some cloaks, it's a bit finicky, wrists, gloves, belt, leggings, and boots, all share stats with other specs and classes, and changes depending upon who wears them. So, a pair of mail boots would offer you intellect, which is your primary stat, if you were in restoration spec. But the same pair of mail boots would offer an enhancement shaman, or a hunter, agility instead. Don't worry about the grayed out agility bonus you see on your gear, you're still gearing correctly. The rest of your gear, so necklace, some cloaks, again it's finicky, weapons, rings, and trinkets do not change, and as such will require that you know what stats you're after. So your primary stat is intellect. However, you don't need to, nor can you, gem or enchant your gear with this, and you don't really need to worry about focusing on it. As long as you pick up things with intellect on them, which as discussed earlier is easy for most pieces of gear, you should be good. What you're really going to want to think about is secondary stats, and here are your secondary stats. First of all, Spirit. This increases your mana regeneration, which lets you cast more costly spells more frequently over the course of a fight, increasing your overall healing. This is a really important stat, but how much of it you want really depends on what you are comfortable with. If you find yourself running out of mana constantly, consider trying to get more Spirit. As it stands, as you're gearing up, trying to get as much Spirit as possible will work. Remember though that you only gain Spirit from trinkets, cloaks, rings, and necklaces. I'm at item level 721, and I'm still aiming for Spirit on my gear, but that has to do with a very particular trinket that we'll discuss in just a bit. Your next most important stat is Mastery. This is your main secondary stat, and you'll want to get as much of it as you possibly can. As discussed earlier, this increases your healing on wounded targets proportional to how much health is missing. This, combined with the Purification passive that increases all the mastery you gain from all sources, means that you want plenty of mastery. There's no kind of cap on how much mastery you can get, so go for as much as you possibly can to make your heals on low health allies heal for that much more. Next up is Haste. This increases your spell casting speed and allows Riptide to apply its healing more often, giving you a small tick of the heal at the end depending upon how much haste you have. For the more veteran players out there, this means that there are no longer haste caps in place, so don't worry about finding or reaching them. Overall, this is a great stat that will allow you to respond to situations faster, which means you can save more lives. The only real cap you have to worry about here is the 1 second global cooldown cap. If you have so much haste that your global cooldown is at 1 second, you're perfect. That's what you want in an ideal world. But if you have too much and it's over that 1 second global cooldown, any additional haste will go to waste, because you can't have a global cooldown of under 1 second. This is not something you're going to need to worry about unless you find yourself absolutely overwhelmed with haste gear, which is unlikely. The only time you're ever going to encounter this is when you have bloodlusted, and you've got all kinds of haste bonuses, and at that point it's not too much of a big deal, because it's only temporary. Next is Critical Strike. The value of this stat depends on whether or not you have your set bonuses. If you have the 2 set tier bonus from Hellfire Citadel, then Critical Strike is worth a little bit less. But if you don't have the 2 set bonus, then it's worth slightly more. Regardless, Critical Strike increases the chance that you will critically heal, which increases your healing and grants mana back thanks to Resurgence, your passive ability. Multi-Strike is next, and its value depends on whether or not you have the 2 set tier bonus from Hellfire Citadel. If you do, then Multi-Strike and Critical Strike are about equal. If you do not, then Critical Strike is slightly stronger than Multi-Strike. Anyway, Multi-Strike grants your abilities a chance to hit or heal a second and a third time, each time dealing 30% of the initial damage or healing. This is a fine stat, but it's just not quite as strong as Haste or Mastery. Finally, Versatility. This is your least potent stat. It's just a flat increase to your damage and healing done, and a decrease to damage taken. It just makes you more effective. It's not a bad stat by any means. It's just not as effective as the others here. Nor is it anywhere near as exciting. Next, let's discuss your tier bonuses. There are 2 tier sets in Warlords of Draenor, Tier 17 from the Blackrock Foundry, and Tier 18 from Hellfire Citadel. Each piece of tier gear from that tier grants you bonuses. You gain a bonus when you have 2 pieces of a set, and another when you have 4 pieces of a set. Each set has 5 pieces: head, shoulders, chest, gloves, and leggings. Your Tier 17 2-set bonus causes your Chain Heal to have a chance to cast a second Chain Heal at one of the targets healed. This is completely out of your control, and all you need to do is keep an eye out for those extra Chain Heals, and make sure you don't overheal by Chain Healing again if you don't need to. Your Tier 17 4-set bonus grants your Tidal Waves effect, triggered by Riptide and Chain Heal, an 8% chance to grant a buff called Harmony of the Elements, reducing the cost of Chain Heal by 50% for 8 seconds. This is a buff that you need to watch out for, because your Chain Heal is a costly but effective spell, and reducing its mana cost for 8 seconds means that you'll generally want to use nothing but Chain Heal during that period. Your Tier 18 2-set bonus increases Riptide's Critical Strike chance by 25%. This is a flat increase to healing, because your Riptide will crit more. This also makes Critical Strike a little less effective as a stat, because 25% of your Riptide's critical chance is coming from your tier bonus. Your Tier 18 4-set bonus grants your Chain Heal a 45% chance to apply Riptide to its primary target. This is a nice set bonus that will allow you to spread more Riptides around without actually casting Riptide. The Riptide applied with this tier bonus is technically a different spell, and you can have both a normal Riptide and a Chain Heal Riptide on a single target active. Of course, you'll still want to be casting the spell normally, but this allows you to prioritize targets without Riptide on them for your Chain Heal casts. Next up, your Class Trinket. This is the core of Primal Elements. It drops from Archimonde on Normal, Heroic, and Mythic difficulty, and it causes your Healing Wave, Healing Surge, and Chain Heal abilities to, if cast on a target with Riptide on them, have a chance to spread that Riptide to another nearby ally. The range of this is about 40 yards, and it will always spread the Riptide with the longest remaining duration. The quality of the trinket, so Normal, Heroic, or Mythic, increases the chance that Riptide will spread. This interacts with your Tier 18 4-set bonus as well. If you Chain Heal a target without Riptide, it's possible for your Chain Heal to apply Riptide, thanks to the tier bonus, and then spread that Riptide, thanks to your Class Trinket. Unfortunately, this trinket is not all that it is cracked up to be. I'm going to quote directly from chainheal.com, a website that will be involved in the advanced section of this guide in a more personal manner, about this particular trinket. Getting out additional Riptides is a great concept, but the trinket has an underwhelming feeling to it. First of all, the way it procs is very disappointing. It duplicates the actual Riptide. This means if you have a 5-second Riptide out, and that causes the trinket to proc, the procced Riptide would copy this duration and thus only last for 5 seconds. On the other hand, it has no beneficial stats, unlike the other trinkets. Therefore, the effect alone has to account for the loss of regen compared to other trinkets, not to mention the output stats you would let go as well. All of this taken into account has made us avoid this trinket at all costs, unless you really have nothing else to work with. So there you go. My personal suggestions for trinkets are the Demonic Phylactery from Socrathar the Eternal. This primarily reduces the costs of your spells, which is fantastic. I would definitely recommend you get your hands on this as soon as you can. The other one is kind of up to you. I would go with either Flickering Fellspark, which is just a bunch of different stats, or Intuition's Gift, which has an active effect that you have to activate, which is very helpful when you need extra throughput during times where you're using cooldowns. This is especially useful on heroic and mythic fights, where the damage really starts to ramp up. However, I would do my best to avoid the class trinket. When it comes to gemming your gear, you'll be doing this a lot less than you did before. Sockets are now a very rare bonus that you can get on gear, and every socket is always prismatic, meaning that there are no socket bonuses and any color gem can be inserted into them. As such, when you have a gem socket, you should always use some version of the Mastery Talidite, which increases your mastery. What quality of Mastery Talidite you use depends on what the piece of gear is and what you're doing. If you're just starting out and you're using pieces of 5-man heroic gear, use the default plus 35 Mastery Talidite. If you're getting into Mythic Dungeons, LFR, and some normal modes, go with the Greater Mastery Talidite for plus 50 Mastery. If you're moving into raiding with a guild at Heroic and Mythic difficulty, and you're doing Hellfire Citadel, go with the top-of-the-line Immaculate Mastery Talidite for plus 75 Mastery. These are naturally expensive, but very much worth it for the bonuses they provide. And just as a note, always gem your gear. Don't let those bonuses go to waste. Next, enchants. Again, there are very few enchants in Warlords of Draenor. Although they can be expensive, you'll want to enchant your gear almost all of the time. Like, the only time you should consider not enchanting your gear is if you're going to replace it within the next day. Once you get into doing LFR in normal mode, every piece of gear that you can enchant should be enchanted. The enchants you should be using are: for your necklace, Gift of Mastery. For your cloak, Gift of Mastery. For your rings, you guessed it, Gift of Mastery. Make sure you get one of these on your legendary ring, or its weaker versions as you go through the quest chain, as soon as is possible. And for your weapon, Mark of Shadowmoon. This grants you a chance to increase your spirit by 500 for 15 seconds, which is great for a healer. But if you're comfortable with your spirit, go with Mark of Bleeding Hollow, which grants a chance to increase your mastery instead. Generally, you can go with either a one-handed weapon and an offhand weapon, or a staff. Just go with whatever has the higher item level and gives you more stats. Either works. Right now I'm using a staff, but it really depends on what drops and what you're given. Now, before we move on, let's discuss your process of gearing up. This is the process you want to go through in order to get your character in gear that's ready for raiding. As you level up, or if you're already at level 100, save up as many garrison resources as you can. Upgrade your garrison to level 2 and then to level 3, using the quest My Very Own Fortress. You'll also need 5,000 gold for this. Once you're at level 100 and your garrison is at level 3, start the quest chain that begins with your faction leader visiting your garrison. Basically, as soon as you have a tier 3 garrison, this will pop up. Complete this quest chain to gain access to your shipyard, and use it to begin the Tanaan Jungle quest chain. Once you have Tanaan unlocked, start doing stuff there. Daily quests, rare killing, exploration. The gear that drops here is called Baleful Gear, and it's item level 650. It can also be upgraded through the use of Empowered Apexis Fragments for 2,000 Apexis Crystals each from Dawnseeker Krisek in the Tanaan Jungle faction outpost. Do lots of Tanaan, basically. As you do this, visit your garrison and start your legendary quest chain. The legendary ring is mandatory, I repeat, mandatory, if you want to be a competitive healer that contributes to a raid team. A serious guild will knock points off of an application if you don't have the legendary ring or you're not very close to getting it. Go through the legendary quest chain, doing LFRs and pugs if possible to gather the stuff you need to complete it. Go through the legendary quest chain, doing LFRs and pugs if possible to gather the stuff you need to complete it. You'll need to do 5-man heroics for this quest chain, which means you'll also need to do the Proving Grounds on Silver difficulty. You can access the Proving Grounds via the fellow behind your war table in your garrison. If you're a leatherworker, or if you know one, or if you have a lot of gold, get your hands on some crafted gear. You can have 3 pieces and they can be upgraded several times to a cap of item level 715. These will really help you as you gear up. As you do gear up, do Heimel and the Blackrock Foundry on LFR and normal mode if you can. Your goal is to reach about item level 680, that's your main goal. Once you're at this item level of 680, get into the Hellfire Citadel on normal mode, if you can. From this point, find upgrades in normal mode to progress into Heroic, to progress into Mythic, if you want to, all while doing your Legendary Ring quest chain to get your hands on Etheralis, the Eternal Reward. Even once you have the ring, kill Archimonde once a week, again if you can, to get crystallized fel that can be used to upgrade your ring. Naturally, if you're in a guild, this process will change, and I do suggest you get into a guild. They are the best way to enjoy this game. And of course, there are lots of different ways to gear up. This is just my suggestion. It's a long process, yes, but once you're in Hellfire Citadel gear, you'll start exponentially growing in power, and you'll become a solid healer, provided you know what you're doing, of course. Now let's talk talents and glyphs. So level 100 hasn't really affected our talent choices too much, but we do have a new tier of talents to play around with, although you won't be playing around with it much, I'm afraid. So let's just get to it, starting with the first tier. Nature's Guardian, which increases your maximum health whenever you're hit by an attack that reduces your health below 30%, isn't really that helpful unless you're getting hit by things that won't kill you instantly, which isn't going to happen in the Hellfire Citadel, I'm afraid. If something hits you, you're dead. It's more of a PvP talent. Stone Bulwark Totem is next, which is a totem that grants you a shield that continues to recharge that shield for 30 seconds. Generally, this is not... it's just not good. The shield is about 8% of your overall health. It's nothing. Right now, the general healing meta, which basically means what most healers are doing right now, is the mentality is that if someone isn't topped off, if they're not at 100% health, then they're in danger of dying. So 8% of your maximum health is just nothing. Don't take this talent. Astral Shift, which is my pick of the tier, this is a flat 40% damage reduction for 6 seconds, with a 1.5 minute cooldown. This is not on the global cooldown, and as such is really helpful for when you want to avoid a burst of damage. This is by far my pick of the tier. Use it as much as you can during a fight, and you will dramatically reduce the damage you take. Tier 2, Movement. Frozen Power, first of all, has its uses, which allows you to Frost Shock to root a target in place. However, since Frost Shock shares a cooldown with your other shocks, and not that many enemies in raids can be rooted, this is remarkably situational. Even in situations where this could be useful, such as Kilrog, and you're trying to kite and slow down the adds, it's not really going to help that much, because they will die fairly fast anyway. Earthgrab Totem is up next. This replaces Earthbind Totem, and instead of slowing enemies, the first time it pulses on an enemy, it will root them for 5 seconds. This is very helpful in a lot of situations, and can kind of replace Frozen Power's root temporarily, so I go with this if I need to root something in a fight. Although generally that's not going to happen too much in the Hellfire Citadel. Finally, Windwalk Totem, which is my default pick of the tier. With a 1 minute cooldown, this removes all slowing effects on the raid for 6 seconds and makes them immune to others. This has a lot of use in the Hellfire Citadel, so make this your default pick unless you know for sure that it has no use in a fight. Examples of uses for Windwalk Totem are for the Gorebound essences on Gorefiend. Windwalk Totem not only removes their slow effect if it's already on the raid, but it also makes the raid immune to the application and damage of the slow. That's huge in Mythic. Sokrathar the Eternal is another example. It makes moving through the fire he leaves on the ground easy. Manaroth is another example. It makes running through the fear puddles easier after you've been pushed through them in the final phase. These are just examples, and it has plenty of uses, so go with this most of the time. Tier 3, the Totem tier. First of all, Call of the Elements. This is pretty decent for restoration, but only if the totems you can use with it need to be used twice in a row. This spell resets the cooldown of your totems with a cooldown of 3 minutes or less. It itself has a 3-minute cooldown. So you're going to want to use this for back-to-back Tremor totems, Healing Stream totems, Capacitor totems, or Windwalk totems, things like that. However, this is not hugely helpful in my eyes, because most of the time there'll be diminishing returns on stuns and CCs and stuff like that. But one example of where it's useful is Kilrog Deadeye. This can see you using 2 capacitor totems one after another in the Visions of Death room, because there are so many ads streaming in and they're all very dangerous. But other than that, this doesn't have as much versatility as my pick of the tier. Next up, Totemic Persistence, which allows you to place 2 of a totem at once, except for fire totems. This only allows you to have 1 extra totem, so you can have 5 up at once at most. This is an okay talent, as it allows you to have a healing stream and a healing tide totem up at the same time, and that's kind of neat. A lot of Restoration Shaman choose it for this reason, but there are 2 reasons why this is not a good idea. Firstly, because there are very few situations where the healing from a healing stream totem will be enough to save someone if they're already being healed by the shaman and by the healing tide totem. And secondly, it's not nearly as strong as the final talent in this tier, Totemic Projection. This allows you to move your totems instantly to a target location. The utility this provides is phenomenal. It allows for a long-ranged stun with Capacitor Totem, a long-ranged root with Earth Grab, it allows you to move your Healing Stream and Healing Tide totems into position where they'll hit the entire raid, and, most importantly, it allows you to reposition your Spirit Link totem so that you can throw it around, making it really useful to place in a group of melee players while you're at range. There are lots of tricks you can do with this. This is my pick of the tier. In fact, I would say that this is practically mandatory. There are so many situations where being able to move and reposition your Spirit Link totem is helpful, and it has added utility being able to move your other totems around for long-range slows, stuns, or heals. Here's a great example. Let's say you're on Gorefiend, and you're doing it on Mythic difficulty, right? You are in his Feast of Souls phase, where the raid is taking heavy damage, and you are expecting to use your Spirit Link totem at any moment. However, you also need to leave the raid stack in order to soak a spirit. These remove the debuff that you get on Mythic. It's the only way to do it on Mythic, otherwise you're going to die. However, when you soak a spirit, it deals area of effect damage around it, so you need to jump out of the raid and intercept a spirit before it gets too close. Most of the time, you're going to be doing this first as a healer, but what if you also want to use your Spirit Link totem, which happens to me almost every time. My raid leader will call out for it, while I'm in the middle of nowhere. What you do is you put down your Spirit Link totem, and then immediately project it on top of the raid. Bang! Done! You've got a ranged Spirit Link totem. There are so many situations where this is helpful. You can apply it to the ranged group for a burst of damage, and then as soon as your ranged team is stabilized, you can project it into the melee for a couple of seconds of redistribution of health. It's mandatory, practically. Go with this talent. Hopefully, I've convinced you out of using Totemic Persistence and going with Totemic Projection. Now, Tier 4, Performance Enhancers. Every talent in this tier can help you increase your healing output, but unfortunately, there is a single talent here which is flat out mandatory. Until you get to very high gear, and you're very confident, that is. First of all, Elemental Mastery. A 2-minute cooldown, 30% haste bonus for 20 seconds. This is really strong, and it's what you should go for if you need maximum burst healing, but unfortunately it's just not as strong as my pick of the tier. It doesn't compare, I'm afraid. Next up is Ancestral Swiftness. This increases your haste by 5% at all times and allows you to, every minute and a half, cause your next nature spell to become instant, allowing you to instantly heal someone. The strength of this talent really depends upon your level of gear. If you're in normal or heroic gear, then the plus 5% haste isn't going to be hugely noticeable. However, if you're in mythic mode gear, then you'll start feeling that plus 5%, because 5% of a number that's already quite large will result in a lot of haste. So, if you're in mythic gear, consider using this talent if you want to get a bit more throughput. It doesn't offer as much flexibility as my pick of the tier, but it's still very strong if used correctly. Using it on cooldown to allow for a double chain heal, or to get a quick healing rain out while you're doing other things, can be incredibly helpful, and I do have a bit of a soft spot for this talent. I've started using it more and more on fights where I don't feel as threatened, so I can start healing things faster, compete with my other healers a little bit better, and just generally speed the entire process up. However, for lower levels of gear, I would definitely suggest skipping out on this until you're extremely confident with using it, because it does not compare in a lot of regards to the final talent of this tier, Echo of the Elements. This is insane. that simple. It's an insane talent. It grants your Lava Burst, Riptide, Unleash Life, and Spirit Link Totem 2 charges rather than 1. That's right, you can use Spirit Link Totem twice. 2 charges, each with their own cooldown. This is gigantic. 2 Spirit Link Totems are great in almost every situation, and having 2 Riptides allows you to blanket the raid in healing. This also works quite well with your different tier bonuses in your class trinket. Pick it in every situation unless you are super knowledgeable about the Restoration Shaman and you have a valid reason for choosing something else. Not having 2 Spirit Link Totems makes your entire raid weaker, especially once you get into Heroic and Mythic, where you really need to start thinking about those cooldowns. In my eyes, nothing can compare to giving one of, if not the strongest healing cooldown in the game, a second charge. That's like having your cake and literally eating it too. Next tier, extra healing. We'll start with Rushing Streams. This causes your healing stream totem to heal 2 targets at once rather than just the one. It also increases the potency of the totem's healing by 15%. Since Healing Stream Totem is used on cooldown and it makes up a significant part of the Restoration Shaman's healing, more than doubling its effectiveness is great. This is my pick of the tier. Next up, Ancestral Guidance. This is like Ascendance Light. This causes you to heal up to 3 nearby injured allies for 20% of your direct damage or healing, lasting for 10 seconds. This is useful when you need loads of burst healing, but generally to get the most out of it you need to dump lots of mana, and you already have Ascendance for that. Ancestral Guidance has a 2-minute cooldown, so it doesn't line up with Ascendance as well. It's just not hugely effective, unfortunately. It used to be much stronger in Mists of Pandaria, but right now it's just not worth it. It won't grant as much healing over the course of a fight as Rushing Streams will either, so avoid it. Finally, Conductivity, which causes your Healing Wave, Healing Surge, and Chain Heal to increase the duration of Healing Rain by 4 seconds each, up to a maximum of an extra 30 seconds. Healing Rain isn't the powerful ultimate spell that it used to be, but it's still not that bad. In fights where the raid is stacked up and you need to consistently raid heal, this talent is pretty good. But most of the time, Rushing Streams will beat Conductivity. Hellfire High Council is an example of a fight where the raid is stacked up for the entirety of the fight, and they're constantly taking damage from things like Mark of the Necromancer, and Blood Boil, and Feldstorm, making Conductivity pretty strong. But most of the time, Rushing Streams will beat it. Level 90 tier now. Here, we have 3 talents that are, unfortunately, dominated by one particular talent. Unleashed Fury empowers your Unleashed Life, causing it to increase the power of your next single target heal by an extra 50%. This effectively means that your next heal will be nearly double its strength, which is good if you need to do a lot of tank healing. But generally this doesn't compare to my pick of the tier in a practical sense. Primal Elementalist is next. This turns your elementals into temporary pets that are very powerful. However, despite them gaining huge increases in damage, tanking, and utility, the sole reason you want to pick this talent is because of an ability that the elementals gain. For the Earth Elemental, this is Reinforce, and for the Fire Elemental, this is Empower. The Storm Elemental from the final tier does not receive an ability like this, and it also doesn't increase its damage. However, when used, these abilities channel power into the Shaman, increasing healing by 10%, and, if it's the Earth Elemental, reducing damage taken by 20%. If it's the Fire Elemental, it increases damage done by 5%, which is irrelevant most of the time. But these buffs are very powerful and last for the Elemental's lifespan, making them really great for healing. A 10% increase to your healing for 1 minute is brilliant. However, there is a significant problem with this tier, and I'll discuss it with the last talent, which unfortunately is the one you want to pick. Elemental Blast. This is an offensive spell that has no mana cost and deals damage to a single target, increasing either your critical strike, haste, mastery, or multi-strike by 500 for 8 seconds. Additionally, this increases your spirit by 1000 for 8 seconds. It has a 12-second cooldown, meaning that you can have this buff up 66% of the time. This talent is useful when you're worried about your mana, and if you're doing any kind of intensive raid healing such as Heroic or Mythic Hellfire Citadel, then you will be worried about your mana, especially if you lack the Demonic Phylactery trinket from Socrathar, as I have for most of my progression throughout Hellfire Citadel. The problem with this tier is that Elemental Blast is mandatory, in a practical sense. The mana regeneration you gain from it is vital to keeping your mana going throughout a fight. In theory, if you have the right gear, i.e. the Demonic Phylactery and plenty of quality spirit gear, you can go with Primal Elementalist. and you will do more healing. But you can't afford to run out of mana before the boss dies. In almost every case, you'll need to use Elemental Blast on cooldown just to keep up. But if you can find an example where this is not the case, for instance if you're doing Heroic and you've outgeared it, then go with Primal Elementalist and go nuts with the healing. On screen are examples of macros you can use to summon the elemental and, if you press the button again, make it cast its Empower or Reinforce on you. And finally, the last tier. These talents improve performance in some kind of way, and there are absolutely no choices. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Again, there's a mandatory pick in this tier. Cloudburst Totem summons a totem that lasts for 15 seconds, and this totem stores a copy of all the healing you do during those 15 seconds. This won't take away from your healing, it just stores a duplicate of how much you do. Once the totem expires, or you remove it manually, it will explode and heal all nearby players for 20% of the stored healing. This isn't strong enough to be considered, even when you're doing loads of raid healing. Sorry. Storm Elemental Totem summons a Storm Elemental which attacks enemies with ranged bolts of wind that heal nearby allies for the damage it deals. It deals pretty significant damage. It lasts for 1 minute and shares a cooldown with your other Elemental Totems. Unfortunately, again, this just isn't strong enough. It's just not useful compared to the final talent in this tier, High Tide. Oh my, this is a talent. This is your mandatory pick as well. This causes your chain heal to bounce 2 more times to targets affected by your Riptide. It also no longer diminishes in power with each bounce. Alright, so consider that your improved chain heal increases the healing on the primary target of chain heal by 50%, and that chain heal applies Riptide if you have the 4-set bonus from Hellfire Citadel, and that chain heal bounces Riptide if you have the class trinket. Yeah, High Tide is entirely mandatory. I apologize for this, but you shouldn't really consider either of the other talents. I wish I could say otherwise, but since Chain Heal is really important to your healing, High Tide is just too damn powerful right now. In super low gear, you could consider the other talents, you know, when you're using Chain Heal and you lose half your mana, but if you're doing any kind of raiding, High Tide is the way to go. Right, onto glyphs. There are 3 main glyph slots you need to consider. One of them is mandatory, one of them is situational, and one of them is multiple choice. The mandatory glyph is Glyph of Healing Stream Totem, which causes your Healing Stream Totem to reduce fire, frost, and nature damage taken by players that it heals by 10% for 6 seconds. This is a passive reduction to most damage types. Remember that a lot of fell kind of effects in Hellfire Citadel are actually fire damage, and it's mandatory. Okay? Next up is your situational glyph. This is Glyph of Purify Spirit, and it grants Purify Spirit, your Dispel ability, 2 charges at the cost of 4 additional seconds to the cooldown. This is useful in fights where you will dispel a lot. It lets you take on most of the dispel responsibility for the Hellfire High Council, and Socrathar, for example. If you need to dispel a lot, slot this glyph in. If you don't, replace it with another glyph, like, for instance, Glyph of Healing Wave. This causes Healing Wave to also heal you for 10% of the healing if you use it to heal someone else. Finally, your multiple choice glyph. This has to do with Spirit Walker's Grace, the spell that lets you cast on the move. There are 3 glyphs for this spell. Glyph of Spirit Walker's Aegis, which grants immunity to silence and interrupt effects for 5 seconds when it is cast. Glyph of Spirit Walker's Focus, which reduces the cooldown of Spirit Walker's Grace by 60 seconds, but reduces its duration by 7 seconds as well. And Glyph of Spirit Walker's Grace, which increases the duration of the spell by 5 seconds. Which glyph you use depends on the fight. Also note that you can't actually use these glyphs together, they get locked out, you can only have one active at once. Which glyph you use depends upon the fight. Most of the time you'll need to pick between Spirit Walker's Focus and Spirit Walker's Grace. If you foresee yourself moving regularly, but in short bursts, like on Gorefiend, then Spirit Walker's Focus is your pick. If you need to move for longer periods, like on the Stampers for Hansgar and Franzok in the Blackrock Foundry, then Spirit Walker's Grace is your pick. Most of the time, I stick with Spirit Walker's Focus as my baseline glyph, and then swap it out depending upon what I'm doing. Just remember to track your Spirit Walker's Grace. You don't want to get caught out thinking that you have more time casting on the move than you do, or wasting time standing still if you still have time left on the spell. There aren't a huge number of glyphs that you need to think about other than that. Instead of Glyph of Healing Wave, you can use a few other glyphs aimed at utility. Glyph of Capacitor Totem reduces its charge time by 2 seconds, letting you stun something quicker, like the Voracious Soul Stalker on Mythic Socrathar. Glyph of Cleansing Waters heals a target that you successfully dispel. Glyph of Grounding Totem lets you use a Grounding Totem more often, which is good for Mythic Zul'Harak for absorbing his Void Surge. Glyph of Riptide isn't something I'd suggest, but it does let you cast Riptide without a cooldown for raid-wide blanket healing. It's a big hog on your mana though, so be careful. You already have enough ways of spreading and generating Riptide via chain heal in my opinion, so I wouldn't suggest this. A Glyph of Shocks increases the range of your shock spells in Wind Shear by 5 yards, letting you do things, especially interrupting, from further away. Those are the glyphs that I suggest, but make sure you mix and match and experiment. This applies to your talents as well. Play what works with you. Unfortunately, there are a lot of mandatory picks in your talent tree, but play around with what you can. Figure out what makes you comfortable and use it. At the end of the day, you're playing your character. I can tell you what's mandatory, but if you want to use something else, use it. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you can find a way to use it, go ahead. Now, let's discuss your spell priorities and how to handle your cooldowns. Unlike DPS classes, as a healer, your playstyle will be dictated by several factors, including, but not limited to, the style of the fight, how your team is approaching the fight, what healers you're healing with, and how skilled they are, and what the fight demands of you as a healer. We'll discuss more about how to approach this in the healing mentality section, but these two sections are naturally interlinked, so let's just jump in. So, your basic rotation, so to speak. Well, I can't really tell you to cast certain spells in a predetermined order, since every fight is different and what you cast is based upon the situation and not a rotation. I'll do my best to cover some principles that you should try to stick to as a Restoration Shaman. First of all, tidal waves. This is an effect that you need to keep track of, and you want to try and make the most of it that you can. The basic principle for this is that you want to have it available when you need it. Thanks to the cast time reduction on Healing Wave and the critical chance increase on Healing Surge that Tidal Waves provides, you want to have it up and running whenever you intend to actually cast those spells. But you don't need to worry about clipping or wasting Tidal Waves. There will be situations where you'll be wasting dozens upon dozens of stacks by chain healing, but it will be in the best interests of the raid's health. Secondly, Healing Stream Totem. Since this is free smart healing on 1 or 2 targets depending on your talent choices, you should aim to have it up as much as you can. Just have as much uptime as you possibly can with this spell. Essentially, you should use Healing Stream Totem on cooldown. Aim to have it active as much as is humanly possible. Third, Earth Shield. This is something that too many Restoration Shaman, myself included admittedly, forget about. You need to have Earth Shield active on a tank at all times throughout a fight. It's free healing on them whenever they take damage, and it increases all healing they receive from you by 20%. This is crucial when you enter fights where tanks get hit hard, which is quite common in the Hellfire Citadel. Don't let there be extended periods of time where you don't have an Earth Shield up on one of your tanks. Fourth, Riptide. With this spell being so important to how we heal, since it interacts with our 2 and 4 set tier bonuses, our class trinket, and High Tide, you need to be using this spell often. It doesn't matter if you clip Tidal Wave stacks, either because the raid damage is so low that you don't need to spend them, or so high that you don't have time to spend them. Just try and get as many Riptides out as you can. That is your overall goal here. Depending on your gear, there are different ways to do this. Just note that I will be including ways to play with the class trinket, although as I mentioned in the gearing section, I would not suggest going with the class trinket if you have an alternative. However, since gearing can be an awkward process, I will include techniques for using the class trinket as well. If you don't have the 4 set tier bonus from the Hellfire Citadel or the class trinket, then spread Riptide by just casting Riptide on cooldown. Cast it on players who are lightly damaged if you can, or who you think will be taking damage soon. Just spread it out as much as you can, use it on cooldown. Also, as a note, try and keep a Riptide on the tanks. It'll help. If you have the 4 set tier bonus, but no class trinket, you should consider chain healing just a little bit more often. Chain heal is still very strong for dealing with heavy raid-wide damage, but if you can afford it, you should consider throwing in a chain heal every now and then to get extra Riptides, but only if you can afford it. If you have the class trinket but no 4 set tier bonus, then your healing waves, surges, and chain heals will spread Riptide. A good technique here is to enter a kind of mini rotation when you're spreading Riptides. Cast 1 Riptide and get your tidal wave stacks. Spend both stacks on healing waves on the Riptided player in an effort to spread the Riptide. Healing wave costs so little that this shouldn't drain your mana too much. Once the stacks are gone, Riptide another player and healing wave them in an effort to spread the Riptide again. This will see you overhealing quite a bit, but because healing wave costs so little and spreading your Riptides around means more healing from chain heal, thanks to High Tide, and more healing overall, this is a good technique to use when you're not that busy with damage. It's also not very mana intensive, as I just said. If you have the 4 set tier bonus and the class trinket, then this is where you have a variety of options for you. You can spread Riptide slow and steady with the aforementioned healing wave spreading combo, or you can spread Riptide fast and quite violently with just constant chain heal casts. This depends on the situation, naturally, but you can continue to spread Riptide even in dangerous situations that see you casting chain heal a lot, which is a very nice bonus. Next, let's talk about Unleash Life. This is a great spell for buffing your healing, but remember that its heal by itself is pretty pathetic, so don't use it to save people. A lot of people don't use this spell correctly. They'll either use it as part of their healing rotation and it won't be strong enough to save someone's life, or they just decide that it's useless and don't use it at all. In truth, you need to use this preemptively, and only on big spells like Chain Heal, or for like a big healing wave on people who are very low, but not in any particular danger. This is a very good spell if you know how the damage is coming in. One great example for using Unleash Life is when you get taken into Gorfiend's stomach during the Gorfiend fight, and as a healer, your role is to heal the Tormented Essences, I believe they're called. They start at 10% or 20% health, quite low, so your mastery will be quite strong on them. So what you can do is you can use an Unleash Life and then just get out a big healing wave on them. This kind of preemptive use of the ability, when you know that either someone is not in any particular danger or they're about to be and you could counter it with a big heal, that's how you should be using Unleash Life. Alternatively, if you can't really find periods in a fight where Unleash Life is really good, remember it does also buff Chain Heal, so you can use it right before raid damage to help out. As I said, alternatively, if you can't find those situations, you can use Unleash Life to help you move around. It's a very helpful spell in that regard, and you still get the healing out of it for your next healing spell anyway. So if you're not too confident with the Shaman right now, you can just use Unleash Life when you're moving around. Just dodging mechanics, stuff like that. Use it on the move. Finally, Elemental Blast. As discussed in the talents and glyphs sections, this is a mandatory pick unless you are vastly overgearing the fights you're taking part in. Basically, you want to use this spell on cooldown. As much as you can, keep this buff up. You can only maintain it 3/4 of the time, but still aim for as much of that as you can. The extra spirit this spell provides is great. Use Elemental Blast on cooldown. If you're doing any kind of difficult progression and you're worrying about mana, you just need to Elemental Blast more, I'm afraid. That's often the caveat there, that's often the problem. Just Elemental Blast more. Okay, so those were a few fundamental things about healing as a Restoration Shaman. Now let's discuss these in a more practical sense. How should you handle the various situations that raids can throw at you? For the purposes of this demonstration, I've created a chart. Don't run away, it's a fun chart. It will help you understand the various scenarios that your raid can face and what it means for you as a healer. So we have green, yellow, orange, and red. Green is downtime, yellow is status quo, orange is danger, and red is emergency. The state of the situation and where it lies on this chart depends upon what you and the other healers do and what the fight's mechanics are. And it can change very slowly or pretty much instantly. You can go from being in the green to being in the red in an instant. So let's start with downtime. The period of time where there's no real healing to be done. There are periods of this in almost every single fight, and you should take advantage of these as much as you can. During these periods of downtime, you should focus either on spreading Riptide, as discussed earlier, or doing a bit of damage while you regenerate mana. Remember that your damage spells don't cost any mana, so throw out a Flame Shock and a couple of Lava Bursts before getting back into healing. A lot of fights, not all of them, but a lot of them, will have downtime near the start. This gives you time to pre-pot, and you should be pre-potting, we'll talk about that later on, and it will give you time to do a bit of damage before you get into healing. It's often good to do a combination of the both during this green downtime. Next, let's move on to the yellow section of the chart and discuss what I call status quo healing. This is where the raid is at full health, but occasionally a few people will take damage. Examples of this are periods during the Iron Reaver fight, where she's only casting unstable orbs rather than firing artillery, Sokrathar the Eternal, where he's throwing out unleashed power for random damage, Shadow Lord Iskar, where he targets people with fire and phantasmal wounds, or Manaroth, where players are only getting hit by his Fellstorm. The situation here is where someone takes some damage and you heal them up, and that's really all that's going on. These are all different examples of status quo situations, where your goal is to return the raid to full health without going nuts with healing spells and throwing your mana away. Depending upon the severity of the damage going out, you could solve the situation with a simple Riptide, a Healing Rain, or a couple of Healing Waves. It could be extremely heavy damage on a single person or a sudden spike of damage on 1 or 2 players, but in this situation you want to keep the raid at full health without losing too much mana. It's important though to note where a status quo, or a yellow situation, becomes an orange danger or a red emergency situation. You need to react accordingly. Status quo only has a certain amount of leeway before things get dangerous, and the higher difficulty you're in the Hellfire Citadel, the smaller this gap is. Some fights will have barely any status quo healing. For instance, Gorefiend on Mythic is pretty much danger and emergency the whole way through. So, when it actually comes to status quo healing, you're going to want to Riptide anyone that loses a little bit of health if you're not spreading the Riptide. That by itself will likely heal them up if they're, don't have a dot on them or something like that. You should be doing this anyway as part of your Riptide spreading rotation. As I said, whenever an individual player takes damage that's not too high, you can just use a healing wave. And then if you have the cooldown available, throw in a Riptide to get them topped off. But only if they don't actually have a Riptide. It's important that you don't override a Riptide unless it's only got a couple of seconds left. If 3 or more players get hit by damage, you should be considering using Chain Heal instead to heal them up. Remember that this spell is costly, and you only want to use it if you know it'll have value to it. If the entire raid is taking a light damage, such as during the Hellfire High Council, you'll want to cast and maintain a Healing Rain on as many players as you can. If it'll hit more players by being in the ranged group, then use it there. If the raid is spread out, throw it onto the melee group instead. Also, if your other healers are putting things like Efflorescence down on the ranged, consider putting your Healing Rain down on the melee, so that you have a bit more even healing over the entirety of a fight. While the Healing Rain is doing its thing, make sure you throw out Chain Heals to heal up as many players as you can. Every fight is a balance between the boss's health and your mana. In an ideal world, you run out of mana right as the boss dies. That way you've been using your mana effectively, using the most powerful spells that you can as much as you can. It's definitely a balance you have to figure out by yourself. It's at this point that healing transitions from being status quo, just maintaining the current state of affairs, to the orange part of the chart, danger. It's in these situations that people are in serious danger of dying if you don't do something, and it's up to you to balance your mana consumption with healing effectiveness. Basically, if someone's about to die, you need to drop what you're doing and heal them. But if you have a good knowledge of the fight and you know that you have time, you can treat it like status quo healing and just heal them up slowly with healing waves. But in the majority of dangerous situations, you'll be wanting to use one of 2 spells: Healing Surge or Chain Heal. If a single player is in danger, use a Healing Surge on them as fast as possible to transition the situation from dangerous to status quo, and then you can relax and heal them up safely and efficiently. If, however, multiple people are taking damage and are starting to get low, you are going to want to Chain Heal, repeatedly. 2 or 3 casts should stabilize the situation, but it's important that you don't overdo it. Chain Heal is a costly spell, and it's what's going to cost you the majority of your mana pool over the course of a fight. Use it smartly to neuter these dangerous situations, then, once things have calmed down, return to spreading Riptide, or, if you've entered downtime, do a bit of damage and regenerate some mana. When in a dangerous situation, surgical healing is important. You don't want to just go crazy and start healing everyone and everyone. You want to use your heals carefully and only heal the people that need it. So, the raid is taking chunks of damage fairly regularly and you're spending a lot of mana with Chain Heals trying to keep things stable. This is still an orange situation. A lot of the time it's a struggle between the damage the boss is putting out and the healing the healers are providing. Even when someone is at risk of dying, it is an orange dangerous situation. It's important to keep people alive, yes, but it's also important not to overdo things and to recognize when the situation has returned to status quo or even to downtime. But when the raid itself is in serious danger, when the entirety of your party is at risk of wiping, this is a red situation. This is an emergency. It's important to note, then, that there are two kinds of emergencies in World of Warcraft. Manufactured emergencies created by the encounter, and organic emergencies that form as a result of your raid screwing up. You have to handle each emergency differently. Almost every fight has a manufactured emergency put in it. Gorefiend, for instance, has a Feast of Souls phase where the entire raid will take heavy damage for 1 whole minute. This is an emergency because everyone is in constant danger of dying for this 1 minute, and if any of the healers stop what they're doing, people are going to die. For these kind of situations, you'll most likely be using your cooldowns. Let's discuss them now and get them out of the way. So, you have Ascendance, Healing Tide Totem, and Spirit Link Totem. Ascendance is by far the most mana intensive of your cooldowns, because by itself it does nothing. I mean, if you use Ascendance, nothing happens until you start healing. So you need to actually heal heavily for Ascendance to enhance that healing. So whenever you intend to use Ascendance, make sure you are prepared to spend a lot of mana. There's no point in using Ascendance when you have no mana left. The general rotation for Ascendance is to put down a healing rain right before you hit the spell, then enter Ascendance, then chain heal your ass off until it ends, basically. This will cost a huge amount of mana. And even me in my mythic gear, I sometimes, when I've got about 6 or 7 seconds of Ascendance left, sometimes I'll just calm down a bit, cast a second healing rain instead, and just throw out a few healing waves and riptides, rather than just going nuts with the chain heals, because otherwise I'm just going to run out of mana. But it's also important to note that Ascendance and lots of chain healing can keep entire raids alive, if you're not afraid of throwing away the mana. Make sure you're prepared to do that, and don't waste time doing nothing during Ascendance. Even when I'm worried about my mana, I'm still healing. Not as effectively, yes, but I am still healing. Next is Healing Tide Totem. This is the easiest of your cooldowns to use. This does your job for you, essentially, healing the entire raid every couple of seconds for a decent amount. It's important to note, however, that it is a water totem, and if you instinctively put down a Healing Stream Totem after you hit Healing Tide, you're done fucked up. You've wasted a gigantic amount of healing. Be very careful, and wait until Healing Tide is done doing its thing, and then refresh your Healing Stream Totem. Other than that, it's important to note that Healing Tide's very good for using when you're on the move. A good example of this is on Shadowlord Iskar. There's a very nasty period of the fight just after the first phase where he's up in the air, he lands. We've got a couple of adds to deal with. We've got fire going out, we've got damage all around the place. It's pretty dangerous. And then we get Fell Chakrams come in, which deals even more raid damage. And we want to move to the other side of the room. It's a very nasty situation because everyone's moving, including the healers. Healing Tide Totem at this point is very strong because it's an emergency situation, it's a red situation because everyone is in danger, and you're going to lose a lot of people, which will lead to a wipe if you don't do something about it. So by using Healing Tide at that point, you can basically have the Healing Tide sit there and keep people stable while the healers transition from one side of the room to the other. That's an example of a good Healing Tide use. Sometimes you just want it for its pure throughput. It's all about using it at the right time. If your Healing Tide Totem is overhealing a lot, then you're probably not using it at the right time, or other healers are clipping their cooldowns with yours. Now this is something we'll talk about in the healing mentality section, but just to quickly mention it, if you're clipping cooldowns with healers, you need to know about it, because cooldowns are important. Finally, Spirit Link Totem. This is an interesting cooldown because it doesn't necessarily provide healing. Rather, it spreads out and reduces damage. It also, most importantly, has a fairly small area of effect. It's therefore important that you figure out the best time to use it. Some fights will have great moments for a Spirit Link Totem, and some won't have any at all. For instance, Shadowlord Iskar has great moments for Spirit Link Totem. When he fires his Focus Blast out, you can just put it down and the entire raid can take the hit together. However, something like Manaroth or Archimonde is a bit more difficult. I'll include a list of good Spirit Link times for each boss on screen now, to help you get started. Of course, you will be communicating with other healers, so again, make sure to communicate how and when you will be using your cooldowns, because clipping cooldowns is very bad. Whenever you're not using a cooldown in these emergency situations, you will likely be spamming Chain Heal repeatedly and throwing mana away in order to keep the raid alive. As I said, it's a balance. When the raid is in the red, use your mana a lot. Remember that your goal as a healer is to keep people alive, not topped off. So in these situations, don't worry about getting someone to full health and moving on unless they are in genuine risk of dying from something unavoidable. Unfortunately, the meta right now, the kind of overall atmosphere of healing, is that if someone isn't at full health, they are at risk of dying. And unfortunately, mechanics kind of back this up. If someone's not at full health, something can kill them. However, in these kind of red situations where everything's gone to shit, it's very important that you keep people alive rather than topped off. You need to play it by ear, basically. The other kind of emergency situation is the organic emergency, where your raid is wiping or is about to wipe, and you need to do something, everything you can, to stop this. This is where a Spirit Link Totem can save the raid. Fell Lord Zakuun is an example of an organic emergency. At any moment, a Wake of Destruction can hit a Fel Crystal or a player with latent energy, and the entire raid will get dropped extremely low, with some players dying. This is an organic emergency because it could have been avoided. Treat these situations like a manufactured emergency if you can. However, just go even further. Drain your mana and chain heal your ass off. In these situations, it's all about throughput. You basically need to overpower the boss's damage, because healing is, like I said, it's the chart. If you're in the red and then suddenly people start dying and you're about to wipe, the only thing that can save you is raw numbers. Pure throughput. You just have to overpower the boss's damage with healing. In these situations, desperately keep people alive, because you and the other healers are the only thing stopping the raid from being destroyed at this point. If the boss is about to die, keep damage dealers alive over healers. If you have to die in this situation, you have to die. But the boss is the one that needs to fall over at the end of the day. If that means you have to die and keep a couple of DPSs alive, so be it. Throw your mana away in this situation. If you can keep the raid going, you're doing your job. It's important to note, though, that if you do manage to save the raid and the fight continues, then find and utilize downtime to regenerate some of your mana, because you're going to have thrown a lot of it away. This is, of course, assuming that this isn't happening very late in the fight, which is when organic emergencies tend to crop up. Finally, let's discuss when you should go to sleep. No, really. You need to have a Dranic channeled mana potion at the ready for the moments when you run out of mana. A lot of fights in the Hellfire Citadel are designed in such a way as to take Dranic channeled mana potions into consideration. Basically, you'll run out of mana halfway through a fight, and the Dranic channeled mana potion will give you some of it back so that you can continue. Of course, you won't have to use one on every fight, but especially as you start getting into some of the more difficult bosses near the end of Heroic, and just about every Mythic boss, we'll see you using a channeled mana potion. Make sure you find a moment where the situation is either downtime or status quo healing, and use that time to drink your channeled mana potion in its entirety. It's important that you try and drink as much as you can. You can only drink once per fight thanks to the cooldown of potions resetting after combat rather than in combat, so you need to make sure you get the most out of it that you can. During these moments, you are leaning on your other healers, so you need to make sure that you tell them, and you also need to make sure that they don't need you for that 10 seconds. There are some fights where this is very difficult, but try and sort it out on a fight-per-fight basis with your other healers. On screen, I will include a list of my suggestions for when to drink your channeled mana potion on each fight. Now, Bloodlust. Oh, Bloodlust. So many Restoration Shaman forget this spell. It is the best raid cooldown in the whole game. Nothing compares to it, not even the fake Bloodlusts that the Alliance and Mages and Hunters have. So, you need to know when to use it. Each boss fight has a moment where the raid will need Bloodlust, and it may not necessarily be at the start or at the end of a fight. Know exactly when to Bloodlust through learning every encounter mechanic that you can, and by asking your raid when they would like to Bloodlust. Even though you're a healer, you need to keep an eye on the fight and Bloodlust at the right time. It is vital that you know when to Bloodlust. Your raid leaders will praise you for using the spell correctly, especially if you're a healer. It shows very good knowledge of your class. A few other spells to think about. First of all, if you have Elemental Mastery, which I don't suggest, but anyway, using it on cooldown will help you throughout the fight. If there is one really heavy part of the fight that requires loads of healing, then save it for that point. But remember that it only has a 2-minute cooldown, so if you can use it and still have it ready for a burst of damage, then use it. The same goes for your Legendary Ring. Good example for this is Gorefiend. On every Feast of Souls phase, you're going to want to use the Legendary Ring. However, there is a gap between when the fight begins and the first Feast of Souls, where if you use the Healing Ring at the right moment, just as the healers are getting pulled into his stomach, you can use the healing ring, and then it will also be available for your cooldown rotation during the Feast of Souls phase. Just note that using Elemental Mastery or the healing ring when there is barely any damage going out is a waste. We'll talk more about the legendary healing ring in the kind of general section. Next, Ancestral Swiftness is a great save your life spell. Have it on a good keybind so that you can use it followed by a healing wave to save someone's life when they are low. You can really bring someone back from the brink of death with this combo. If you have Ancestral Guidance, which again I do not suggest, but regardless, use it as you would Elemental Mastery when there are big bursts of damage. Again, try not to waste it. If you have Primal Elementalist, then your elemental totems will combine well with the Empower macro, which you can find on screen now. Just hit this once you summon your elemental and it will channel its buff onto you, letting you do 10% more healing. This won't top off a raid, but it will help you significantly over the course of a fight. Try saving one of your elementals, preferably your Earth Elemental, for a burst of damage to help you survive it and heal through it. Any racial power bonuses that you have, such as Blood Fury or Berserking, then use them when you need to rapidly heal and a cooldown is not called for. Generally, using these spells on cooldown will help, as long as the raid is actually taking damage when you use them. A good technique is to combine your racial abilities with Ascendance in order to increase the healing that it provides. You can essentially double the power of your racial because your Ascendance is copying the healing, and the healing is also being buffed by your racial, and then the healing coming from Ascendance is also buffed, so double dipping, fantastic. Next, a few tips for healing in general. First of all, know your ABC. This is a common theme for casters and it is vital. A, B, C. Always be casting. Never, ever just be standing there doing nothing. Unlike the melee, you don't have the safety net of melee attacks. If a melee isn't using their abilities, they are weaker, yes, significantly so, but they are at least hitting the boss. They are at least doing something. If you're not casting, you're useless. Literally, you're just standing there. So always cast something. If you don't have things to heal, do a bit of damage with Flame Shock, Lava Burst, and Lightning Bolt. They're free, after all. If you don't have anyone to heal or anyone to damage, prepare for damage by putting down Searing Totem. Use Healing Rain to prepare for healing. Additionally, try not to cancel spells if you can help it, unless it would completely overheal someone or a group of people who are already topped off. This is wasted healing and wasted mana, but in most situations you won't encounter this problem, since damage is fairly consistent. In these cases, it's a good idea to just see the spell cast through, even if it's lessened because of the other healers getting heal in before you. Of course, stop casting to avoid mechanics, but try to avoid cancelling one spell for another, even if the second spell is much stronger or the first spell is slightly weakened. This is another one of those things that you kind of have to build up an instinctive kind of feel for. Next up, know what you're casting next. Your rotation is a priority system that can change in seconds, so know your spells, what their strengths are, and most importantly, know the fight. Know how the damage will come in so that you can prepare in your head. Who is going to be taking damage next? A group of players in melee range? The ranged team? Everyone? The tanks? Is there anything you can do to preempt the damage with Healing Rain? Are you using your cooldowns effectively? Know what you're going to be doing before your next spell is done as much as you can, and think ahead as much as possible. I generally tend to know what the next spell I'm going to cast will be. This also goes into things that involve the encounter, such as, you're casting a chain heal, then a chain heal, and then you see Phantasmal Winds on the Iskar fight is about to come out. So you think in your head, okay, I'm going to need to pass the eye if it goes to me. So make sure you know what's coming up. Combine all of this with the encounter mechanics and good knowledge of them, and you'll be dancing around the enemy's attacks while keeping everyone alive. Finally, learn your spells and how to cast them. By this, I don't just mean know where the spells are on your keyboard, I mean master them. Practice with dungeon runs as much as you can. 5-man heroics are pretty easy, but mythic dungeons still have some teeth, and undergeared players might take loads of damage. Use this to teach yourself about your spells and how they work. Experiment, figure out what works for you, and try to surround yourself with information so that you always know what to use next. We've gone over lots of information about the Restoration Shaman, what it is, how to gear, gem, enchant, talent, and play it. But there are things that you need to know regardless of your class. Let's discuss a few things that you need to think about as a healer. These tips should help you regardless of what class you play. First and foremost, you need to know your class and use your character with skill reliably. This is actually quite important. Your healing spells, how they work, and how to use them need to be ingrained into your brain to the point where you don't really need to think about them, because as a healer you'll need to think about the fight and how damage is being applied to the team, not how your own spells work. This extends to your user interface too. Make sure you're comfortable with it, and do everything you can to learn how it works. Practice, practice, and more practice in order to get to this point with your class, your spells, your user interface, your movement, and your keybinds. Next up, you need to be able to think ahead. Know the fights you'll be participating in as much as you can, and try to think about what kind of damage will be coming out, and when it will come out. This is called proactive healing, and although there's not too much you can do outside of spreading riptides and putting down healing rain in preparation for damage, a great healer knows when damage will be hitting their team, and they'll react to it appropriately. If you can start a chain heal right before damage comes in, you can heal people very, very quickly. Good ways to know who's going to be hurt is to see who the boss is targeting with abilities, the timer of those abilities, the way they're facing, the energy meters. You just need to know how the fight works, essentially. You need to know what you can do to mitigate the damage, and you need to use your cooldowns effectively in response. Think about what spells you can use to make life easier for everyone. Additionally, you need to understand that in a raid group you are a member of a team. This team needs to trust you to do your job, and you need to trust them to do theirs. The most important aspect of this trust is communication. If a healer screwed up, you need to know about it, and if you've made a mistake, you used a cooldown at the wrong time, you're in the wrong place, you're low on mana, or something like that, you need to tell people. Don't hide your mistake, because the other healers will be flying blind without your communication. Tell the team when you're using Healing Tide and your Spirit Links. Call them out. Don't ever just use a cooldown arbitrarily and don't let the other healers know. If you fat-fingered it, by that I mean if you used it incorrectly, but you didn't mean to, you just pressed the button by accident, then tell people. They need to know this, or you're gonna die. Tell them when you're drinking as well, so that they know what's going on. It's all about information. Never deny the other healers access to that information. Next, think about your mana and manage it correctly. Now, correctly managing your mana revolves around a few things. Your spirit, how you play, what your role in the team is, and how the fight plays out. Generally, if you run out of mana as the boss dies, you have spent your mana very effectively. If you have loads of mana when the boss dies, you may not have spent it as effectively, or maybe it's just a very easy fight. And if you're out of mana before the boss dies, you have probably been overspending your mana. Now, there are loads of ways to handle mana management, but there is one large contributor to it that a lot of people overlook, so that's what we'll be talking about now. Overhealing. Now, overhealing is the process of healing someone with a healing spell that takes them above full health. For instance, if someone has 100,000 maximum health, and they lose 20,000 of it to damage, it leaves them at 80,000 health. If I then heal them for 30,000, then 20 of that 30,000 will heal them up, and 10 will disappear. It will do nothing. This is overhealing, and although the example I gave was very minor, repeatedly overhealing players by using powerful healing spells, i.e. chain heal, and using it on players at high health will drain your mana, and it won't be very effective. The most common way to run out of mana at a bad time is by overusing chain heal. It's a great spell, yes, but you have to find the right balance. This balance is determined by the fight, how difficult it is, by your raid team, and how they work, how they respond to damage, and how much damage they take, by who you're healing with. The other healers might be able to beat you to it, or maybe they won't be able to, maybe you're the one who's carrying most of the weight, and by your gear. Again, if you don't have that damn demonic phylactery, chain heal is going to cost you a lot of mana. You need to think about this, and you need to be careful with it. To avoid overhealing, it is vital that you think about how to best heal people effectively. Think about how the fight works. If someone is at 70% health and they won't be taking damage again for a while, they're not really in that much danger. Heal them with mana-efficient spells like Riptide and Healing Wave, or just trust the other healers to beat you to it. let the other healers top them off, and you can regenerate some mana in the meantime. You'll be able to pay them back later on because you'll have that mana. It's a team effort, remember. If someone is low, but they won't be taking damage for a long time, do the same thing. If you overreact and overheal all of the time, you're going to run out of mana. Don't worry about being sniped, either. It's a good reason to cancel your spellcast if someone gets a raider up to 100% health before your cast is finished. Move on and save the mana. Just remember, you're part of a team. You cannot solo heal these fights. You need to do it together. Additionally, remember that you have not failed at your job until someone is dead, and being at 20% health and being dead are two very different things. Remember your role as a healer. Keep people alive. You do not have to top people off all of the time if it means your mana will be disappearing. There are some very damage-intensive sections of fights, and it's important that you focus not on topping people off, but on keeping them from dying. Once the damage is over, you can start thinking about bringing them up to full health. Let's talk about sniping now. This is a very common practice in the healing environment, and it's something you are going to come across. The act of sniping is when a player loses health, and the healers attempt to beat one another to healing that person up. If you see someone dip to 60% health and start casting a healing wave, someone else may have reacted faster, or may be using a faster, more mana-intensive spell, and may get the heal off before you. This would mean that your entire heal would be an overheal. This is a snipe. Similarly, if you quickly heal someone up when they lose health, negating the effects of someone else's heal, you're sniping them. It's important to note that sniping is not a bad practice. In fact, it's healthy for the raid overall, especially when you start reaching difficult bosses. Yes, it's annoying when someone snipes your heal on some of the easier fights, but if you have several healers competing for healing, then when a player is in proper, serious trouble and one of the healers is busy, either because they're dead, doing something fight-related, or they're just out of range, that player already has other healers competing for a heal. If that player is only in range of one healer, that healer will still be trying to heal them, meaning that the player will stay alive. If the healers are not trying to snipe one another's heals, then when that dangerous situation comes along and someone is in serious danger, a healer might hesitate. They might not know that they're the only ones in range in the heat of the moment, and that hesitation will lead to players dying. This is why heal sniping is, for basic non-cooldown healing spells, a good idea. This is the basic fundamental mentality that you need to get into your head. If someone needs a heal, you heal them. Even in a mythic team, you might not be assigned to heal anything in particular. Our team does it a bit differently, but it's all up to the team you're in. You have to be prepared for some healing assignments, and you also have to be prepared for no healing assignments. But basically, if someone needs a heal, you are the one that will heal them. Put that in your head. If someone beats you to it, then fantastic. They've done their job, and you have done yours. And that overlapping of heals will save someone's life in the future. And if you can react fast enough, you can cancel your spell and save the mana. Done. Sorted. No problem. I'm going to directly quote Icy Veins now, because I think this quote perfectly sums up how healing works. Tanks and DPS players do, sometimes, have to make split-second decisions, and these decisions can sometimes impact the outcome of the encounter. Healers, on the other hand, have to make this kind of decision every time they use a spell. Think about that. Now, a few more things. First of all, and I'm going to reiterate this because it is vitally important, make sure you communicate with your other healers. Using cooldowns to handle certain situations is great, but coordinating those cooldowns with your other healers so that you never use too many cooldowns at once and overheal is even better. Communicate how you use your spells through your voice communication software, and use an add-on like Rayleigh's Spell Announcer or Exorcist raid tools to let the raid know when you cast certain spells, and even consider making a custom chat channel for your raid team's healers to communicate in so that you can sort out things like cooldowns and healing assignments in your own chat room rather than in the raid chat. It's also a very good way to bitch and say, hey, this person keeps standing in fire. Anyway, figure out how to heal with the other members of your healing team. If you're working against one another, then really the rest of the raid is screwed. One thing to note as a healer is something called triage healing. This is the act of making split-second decisions as to who lives and who dies. Sometimes, although not always, you may find yourself surrounded by low-health allies, all of whom are at risk of dying. This is often due to mechanics, which would be a manufactured emergency, but can also be due to mistakes made by the raid, which would be an organic emergency. At this point, you have to accept the fact that unless you're willing to use a huge cooldown, you are not going to be able to save them all. So, triage healing dictates how you behave in these situations. You have to be judgmental, unfortunately. Who among the targets you have to heal is the most important? Which is the most important role? Who is the more skilled player? This depends upon the fight, where you were in it, and who is still alive. You can generally use this mindset to figure out who to save. First, the tanks. If a tank is on the list of people that need saving, 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to save them. Without them, in almost every single case, the fight is over. After that, judge based upon the boss's health. Are you close to killing the boss, or is this happening at high health? More often than not, if a boss's health is super low, it's a complete emergency and the only way out of it is to kill him before he kills you. In this case, keeping a damage dealer alive so that they can kill the boss faster is a damn good idea, even if it means sacrificing healers. Healers won't kill the boss at this point. Note which damage dealer is the most effective at executing a boss. Warriors are, for example, extremely good at killing bosses who are low, but will suffer if the situation is melee unfriendly. After damage dealers, try to save healers. Just try and keep everyone alive once you've got the damage dealers safe, although in most situations, you're going to be going nuts. Now, if the fight is not nearly over, try to save healers after the tanks. This does include yourself, naturally. Triage situations are emergency situations, so it is impossible for me to tell you who to heal at what time in a fight. You just need to do everything that you can to control the situation and just spend all of your mana, basically. Go nuts, go with your fastest and strongest healing spells, Chain Heal and Healing Surge. Go insane, basically. Next up, know your tanks. This is a very important aspect for healing them. Not only does the tank's class have a lot to do with how they take damage, but how they play and their skill level is also important. If you have one tank who is more skilled than the other, take that into account whenever they swap on a boss. Think about who takes the most damage and how they take it. For example, warriors, druids, and paladins tend to take fairly smooth damage, depending upon their active mitigation. If they make a mistake with it, then they'll start taking heavy hits. If they get low, you're going to need to save them real fast. Monks are going to be in one of two situations. Either they'll take nice smooth damage as they stagger and purify it, or they're going to be taking huge chunks of damage if they fall behind. If a monk fails to purify a red stagger, they are in serious trouble. Death Knights will be competing with you for healing. Expect a good Death Knight to beat you to the initial heals after a burst of damage, but this is by no means an excuse to not heal them, especially on fights that strain the tanks, because they can't keep themselves alive. All they're doing is helping you, and because their abilities are instant, they'll get those first few heals off initially, and then you can top them off. That's mainly how it works with Death Knights. Of course, this isn't 100% accurate, and it will depend upon the tanks you're working with and the healers around you, but try to think about how your tanks take damage and do your best to remember it. If you have a tank who tends to lose health fast, make sure you keep that in mind and prepare to heal them. Not every tank is perfect, and you need to be ready to accommodate for mistakes when they get hit hard. Use your head all of the time. There is so much to talk about as a healer, but I'll try and condense it into a conclusion of sorts now. Think at all times about how damage will be coming in. Be comfortable with your character and their skills. Know who you are healing and how they take damage. Preempt that damage and heal proactively. Know which spells in your toolkit are suited to which part of the fight. Communicate with your other healers. Manage your mana as much as you can. Avoid doing too much overhealing. Have a smart and clean user interface. Have lots of information available to you. Triage heal the most important players of any given situation. I'm going to say this again. Communicate with your other healers. And most importantly, keep a level head. Don't panic. Don't run around in circles. Cast your spells thoughtfully, carefully, and with purpose. Do your best to never panic, even in the intense situations that you will be getting into. Keep yourself calm and collected, move from the bad stuff, and save the raid. That's your job. Right, let's move on to some useful macros and add-ons. These aren't 100% necessary to master your shaman, but they are really helpful and I would definitely suggest them. So, macros. I only have a couple that I use for specific spells and then a whole bunch that I use just in general. Now, these can be quite helpful if used right. First of all, I have an Ascendance macro. This is a macro that just casts Ascendance and all of my cooldowns that stack with it. So Berserking, Elemental Mastery, and Spirit Walker's Grace. I don't use this macro often, but for newer players, combining Ascendance and Spirit Walker's Grace into a single macro can be very helpful. Just note that their cooldowns do not align, so you still need to have Spirit Walker's Grace ready to be cast on its own, or you'll waste time with it, just sitting there waiting to be cast. Next, a haste buff. This allows me to cast Berserking and Elemental Mastery at the same time. Nice and simple. Next up, a helpful Wind Shear macro. This stops whatever spell you're casting and casts Wind Shear instead. This can be helpful in a oh crap moment where you really need to get that clutch interrupt out. I'm looking at you, Socrathar. Now, let's discuss MOUSEOVER macros. These are a little complicated, but remarkably helpful, and let you cast your healing spells by mousing over a player frame and pressing the button, rather than clicking on them and then casting. This is a personal preference, and I have created a new player's guide, all about macros if you want to learn more about this. Use the video on screen now, or the link in the description to view it, and don't worry, it won't close this video, it will open in a new tab. But if you don't want a whole guide for it, and you want to just know what a MOUSEOVER macro looks like, then this is it. / cast, space, open bracket, target, equals, MOUSEOVER, close bracket, space, then the name of the spell. Spells that I suggest using in MOUSEOVER macros are Healing Wave, Healing Surge, Chain Heal, Riptide, Earth Shield, and Unleashed Life. Finally, a Primal Elementalist macro. This one is somewhat complicated, so much so that I suggest copy and pasting it from the description, but it will summon either your Fire or Earth Elemental, depending on what you type in, and then, if you press it again, it will make the Elemental cast Empower or Reinforce on you. Use one for Fire Elemental Totem and one for Earth Elemental Totem. Storm Elemental Totem doesn't have any kind of spell that it channels on you, so don't worry about that. Those are all of my macros. You don't technically need any of them, but each can be helpful in their own way. Next up, add-ons. There are some very useful ones here. First of all, get yourself a boss mod add-on, either Deadly Boss Mods or BigWigs. Either one of these will help you figure out what is going on in a fight, when it's going to happen, and where it's happening. It's practically mandatory if you're in a raiding guild anyway, and it does also help during LFR, so grab a boss mod add-on. Next, WeakAuras. This add-on is remarkable. If you only ever download one add-on, make it WeakAuras. In a nutshell, this add-on allows you to create timers, icons, effects, and animations on your screen for, well, anything. Tracking buffs and debuffs, cooldowns, internal cooldowns, stacks, procs, boss abilities. It's insanely helpful, and can give you so much information. The only downside is that it's quite complicated. Okay, I tell a lie, it's remarkably complicated. However, I have created a basic guide for it. You can click the link on screen now, or use the link in the description to open that video. If you do click on screen, don't worry about it closing this video, it'll open in a new tab. Next up, a good, clean cast bar will help you to chain cast your spells effectively. Quartz is my suggestion here. Pretty easy to set up and customize, this cast bar add-on allows you to do just about anything with all cast bars, from your own to your targets to your pets to your focused cast bar. You can find information about setting up Quartz as part of my basic UI guide, which, again, you can find in the description or on screen now. Once more, it'll open in a new tab. Finally, a good raid frame add-on will help you target your allies, see your buffs on them, and track debuffs. The default Blizzard frames work okay for this, but if you want to use an add-on, then I suggest VuhDo. You can find information about this add-on in my basic UI guide. If you'd like to see how I have set up my user interface, you can find my video about that on screen now, or by hitting the link in the description. Once again, it won't close this video, it'll open in a new tab. Okay, now for this section, I have some very special guests on with me. I have got in contact with a website called chainheal.com, which is a new website that has dedicated itself towards the high-end Restoration Shaman, and I have the various writers and owners of this website with me today, and we're going to have a quick chat, hopefully, about the Restoration Shaman in a more advanced setting. So I have a few questions set up, and we're just going to ask these lovely folks about the Restoration Shaman in all of its glory. So, without further ado, let's start by introducing ourselves. So we'll start with Doralai. Welcome to the guide.
Thank you very much. I'm Doralai, a shaman since Mogashan Vault, and I founded chainheal.com since 2 weeks. So, together with a bunch of other guys, we've been working very hard to bring you the best about Resto Shamans.
Fantastic. And we also have with us Dunders. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. So, I'm Dunders, and I play Restoration Shaman for a guild called Bonanza, a hardcore raiding guild. And before this, I've also played in Slash Cry and Echoes. And yeah, a grand total of like 5 years, I think.
Fantastic. And we also have with us, and I'm going to get this name wrong, it's, I'm going to say Hallucinogen, or we will just be calling him Hallow for the purposes of this recording. So, welcome.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Hallow. I'm Officer of Guild Enraged Revolution on Ragnaros EU, and I'm glad I can be part of this.
Yes, thank you very much. We also have with us Keen. Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm Keen. I raid with Danish Terrors, and I've been raiding with them since Dragon Soul. And that's partially when I started my Resto Shaman career.
Fantastic. And finally, we have with us Mint. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, Mint. Shammy back from the back in the days from Burning Crusade. Healing ever since. Always been healing. I'll never change that.
All right, so let's jump right in it with our first question. So, from a mechanical perspective, what would each of you say is the most important aspect of actually playing a Restoration Shaman successfully?
For me, I'd say mechanical perspective, it's really good to know what your totems can do, what totems you have. And whenever you go into new raids, just to see how you can use them, if there are any ways that you can just make the life of the raid a lot easier. I'd say that's something, if you know how to do that well, yeah, that really shows, if you know your shaman well.
Yeah, I definitely know that there's one very good example, is you can actually use Grounding Totem on the Void Surge ability on Zul'Harak, which is there are strategies built around that, and it's important to know that you can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great example.
I think it's important as a Resto Shaman to keep an eye on where you are on the boss fight, and try to min-max the movement you do in order to both put out most healing and avoid getting hit by stupid shit.
I think it's a tough question. I feel that shamans, or Resto Shamans, specifically compared to other healers, I don't have experience on monks whatsoever, but from the other ones that I've played at a fairly decent level, I'd say it feels like there is more focus to just actually playing the game right. Like there's more focus to just, I don't know, it's like regardless of what you're playing, I'd say, there's just an all-around focus on doing things right. I can't think of anything specifically that would make you superior to anyone else, like anyone else playing a Restoration Shaman by doing something specific. I think it's just down to the specifics, really.
Well, first of all, in my opinion, you need to understand the mana cost of your spells. You need to optimize your spells well, and I would say you need to be aware of all the utility you have, like to help your raid to down the bosses, I guess.
What I feel is most important is learning to master the mastery, because it's a huge part of our class. So knowing what hurts, when damage is coming, so you can actually sort of snipe that before the stupid absorb classes get ahead.
Only when you don't have monk.
You can't really snipe absorbs.
Yes, and that's actually interesting, because I have talked earlier in the guide about sniping, and I personally feel like it's a good technique, because that means lots of healers are trying to heal the same person. But what do you feel about how far we should go as shaman to try and snipe other healers? Is it something we should be actively trying to do?
Well, if you want to maximize your healing, like you should try to snipe the heals. Like on progress, you should be just making sure you have enough mana to heal when it's needed, and like just go slow, at least from my experience.
Well, the strength of a shaman lies within our mastery. So being able to have the first heal on a person that's on low health means that we'll be able to heal them for far greater amounts than any other healers, giving it far greater value for us to like get that initial heal off.
I also think it's like it depends on what scenario you're in if we're talking sniping, because I've never really cared so much about numbers. Honestly, I guess it's a cool thing if you manage to get a good rank on like during farm, but it's not ever something I'm aiming for, or I'm specifically asking people to do something for me, or ditch a discipline priest, or have someone play something else, or drop healers. It's just a cool thing that's there, but I don't think you should ever. I don't think you should change up the way you play or build your raid around trying to get as good ranks as possible.
So, let's move on now, and I know that this is definitely something that a lot of players might be surprised by, and I know I definitely was. In the Hellfire Citadel, trinkets are huge, absolutely huge. I mean, the class trinkets, the very fact that they exist presents that. So, with these trinkets playing such a huge role in the raiding scene right now, what trinkets would you personally suggest to a Restoration Shaman, and why?
Alright, so recommendations for trinkets in Hellfire. I'd say there's more than just the two primary ones I'm wearing right now, but it's throughout most of progression. I was personally using Demonic Phylactery, which is the one from Socrathar, the mana reduction costs, with Intellect and Haste, and I was also using the one from, what's it called? The one that drops from Hellfire Assault, Flickering Felspark, I believe, with the passive stats. I've heard of a lot of shamans going with Intuition's Gift as well for the on-use crit, and I know it does line up pretty well with your cooldowns because it's on 130, or 1 minute 30 seconds cooldown, but I just don't feel that it's not a significant enough cooldown to make any real difference. Like, whenever there's a moment where you need a boost in throughput, you generally have some kind of raid-wide cooldown assigned for that, so anything above that is just going to be overkill in that kind of way. It doesn't feel like a mandatory trinket. It's still a very good option, but I wouldn't put it within our best in slot trinkets. It's definitely not a top 2 in my book, at least. And then, of course, there's also the Leech one, which loses some of it, like some of the value from it is lost due to the fact that it doesn't actually gain anything from our totems. Our totems doesn't actually proc the Leech effect onto that, but it's still decent. I think it's better on druids and monks, though. But pretty much any trinket that has any use to you in this, like has any stats whatsoever that's of use to you, you can pretty much go as from this tier, apart from the class trinket, obviously, which is a bit sad, but...
That's actually interesting. Why would you say that the class trinket is one of the worst ones for Restoration Shaman, when, in theory, anyway, it's been designed for us?
It's not a horrible trinket. I mean, it's better than nothing, and I guess it's up on par with like trinkets from like the earlier tiers and stuff. But it's I know that when you look at it and considering our set bonuses, I think it's sort of like they counter each other out. Like you would still, even if you went with the 4 set plus the set bonus, you'd still see an increase. It's not that they literally negate each other, but it's just if you have one or the other, it kind of diminishes the gain you get from having the other one as well.
Yeah, you get too much of an overflow of Riptides out. I mean, it's not that valuable. And also when it copies the Riptide, it copies the actual buff. So the new Riptide can have down to 1 second left on its duration, ultimately meaning a wasted proc.
The trinket was, when it was first made back in the PTR, back then the Chain Heal was still benefiting from Riptide. And that was actually kind of good because it synergized with High Tide, it gave you those 25% more healing and so on. But then they scratched the Riptide buff to Chain Heal, so basically you don't need Chain Heals all over the place now, only just to make High Tide viable.
Not entirely, like I think the Intuition's Gift is just better than Felspark. Like, it is higher item level, it brings more intellect, more spirit, and you just lose the passive mastery on it and a bit haste. I guess if it was same item level, then Fellspark would be strong for the fights where Healing Tide was not a huge. Where you cannot have a huge Healing Tide on certain fights. Like for example, Xul definitely Fellspark is better, I guess. But overall, like I'm running with both Demonic Phylactery and Intuition's Gift.
Our definite biz is Demonic Phylactery because of the huge mana gain we gain from it, and then the amazing passive stats it has with Intellect and Haste. For the second biz, I think it's a more fluid thing, because depending on how you can manage the cooldown on Intuition's Gift, it's going to gain value. And I mean, as soon as you don't pop it on cooldown, it's going to lose value. So if you're good at min-maxing stuff like 1.5 minute cooldown trinkets, then it's going to be a gain for you to pick up Intuition's Gift. But on I think Flickering Fellspark is a better all-round trinket for bosses with steady damage income, and the added crit from Intuition's Gift is just going to improve your snipe game with Healing Tide or other cooldowns as you pair them. So it's pretty blurred, the lines between those trinkets, in my opinion at least.
I agree actually. It's not like I wasn't trying to give you the idea of that I think that Intuition's Gift is absolute garbage. The thing is, it definitely has its use, and I agree on that there are some fights where you might see a bigger benefit out of picking Intuition's Gift compared to Flickering Fellspark. It's just that to gain as much value as possible from Intuition's Gift and the crit bonus you get from the on-use, you generally want to pair it with like a part of the fight that there is a high damage intake where, and also you'd like to pop it together with like high throughput cooldowns like an Ascendance or a Healing Tide. And the thing is that during these assigned moments of pretty much any given fight where you're assigned to pop your Healing Tide or blow an Ascendance, then that cooldown alone is supposed to be able to get you through. So the Intuition's Gift might give you more value, value in terms of numbers, but it's not going to make or break the fight like the usage of that trinket.
Yeah, well, I would like to add, like, in my opinion, like Fellspark is a lot stronger for Discipline Priest than Resto Shamans, because like Resto Shaman is at the moment, in this tier, like you shine on burst damage parts of the fight. Like when there is not a lot of damage, like you're gonna be weaker than both Paladins and Discipline Priests. And I don't know, I guess that's why I prefer Intuition's Gift. Because like you can just use it on the parts of the fight where your healing is gonna be really high, so you're gonna pull even higher numbers.
Well, I love the mana cost reduction because it basically means more chain heals and with Forset, more Riptides and so on. And for the second one, yeah, if it has its moments. I mean, since I raided a lot with a Discipline Priest and a Holy Paladin, I would really, I just haven't received it, but I would love the Fellspark because there was not a lot of healing going around for me. It is a choice about, do you want stats, pure stats, raw stats, or do you want some on-demand burst to already great burst healing?
I actually ran for a very long time the Leech Trinket, but since I've been talking with these guys, I've been really wanting to get the other ones. I did have the Demonic Phylactery, or however you pronounce it. I really want the other ones now. I don't have them. So once I get them, I'm definitely going to play around with it, and I look forward to using Intuition because it would allow me to abuse getting healing numbers when there actually is some damage. Since most groups that I join currently, they don't take a lot of damage anymore. So it's just trying to snipe what you can snipe. So I guess I would love to use Intuition's Gift for that.
And that's actually, I find that quite interesting because I've definitely noticed as I've gone through my career as a healer and just in general, that as you get towards guilds that know more and more about what they're doing, and they tend to get hit by mechanics less and less, it definitely changes the way that you play. And It's actually interesting. What would you suggest in terms of trinkets for, say, someone who is doing normal and heroic, where you can expect people to get chunked fairly hard because they get hit by an ability, but the healers still have time to react to it? What would you suggest in terms of trinkets for them?
Well, as I said, get the phylactery because it just smooths out like the whole mana reduction, or what is it that gives you. I think the stats from the first trinket to the flickering fellspark is going to help a lot because it gives you constant output. You don't have to think about it, like when to pair it. And if there's a lot more panicky moments, then you might have to pop your cooldowns early, and you might not be able to pair it up nicely, as we would do with Intuition's Gift. So you might forget to use it a time or two, and that would really be a waste. So I guess for if there's a lot more unpredictable damage, because people make mistakes, then the continuous trinkets are probably a better way to go. So perhaps even the leech trinket, but most definitely the flickering fellspark. I'm curious if the others agree with this.
I mean, I agree that flickering fellspark is going to beat Intuition's Gift on fights with steady damage income. And I also think that the leech trinket is going to have value on those fights. So if you have the leech trinket on, say, Gorefiend during feasts, I think it's going to have a lot of value. Also because you do increase damage on the boss.
There's one thing about the leech trinket though, is that it's recommended to get an add-on. I'm not sure what the name is, but it shows you the amount that the healing trinket has done because it doesn't show up on the logs or meters. I guess it's good to be aware that this is a thing, and that you may actually be doing a lot more healing than the HPS on the meters suggest. So it's a nice one to get.
Okay, so this is a good time, I think, to segue towards healing meters. So for a lot of healers and a lot of players in general, rankings are quite important. But I want to boil that down to its kind of more primal form. So whether you're in like an LFR or you're progressing through Mythic or anything in between, someone in your raid is going to have damage and healing meters. And they tend to be typically very important to a lot of players. So my question is, how important in truth do you guys think healing meters are? Not only in terms of, well, I suppose just in terms of evaluating a healer's performance.
I think, I mean, of course, your throughput on fights has some kind of relevance. It gives you an idea of how good you are compared to others, and it gives you it can very easily give you an idea of how viable certain specs are on like fights you aren't familiar with. Like if you're during progression, and you just got to a new boss and you want to figure out what healers would be viable to bring to this boss, then I guess that's a good thing. As for who tops the meter, as long as you and your guild are like comfortable with the comp you're running and you know that it's possible to kill the boss with the current comp you're running, I don't think it really, like, you shouldn't beat yourself up like over the fact that you finished like last or be super psyched about finishing first. You should always try and push as much as possible. I mean, it's like HPS. The more HPS you do, the more it will help your raids. Like but there has to be some kind of balance.
Well, what I also would love to point out for Shaman specifically is that usually when you start progressing on a fight, at the start you'll do a lot more HPS than towards the kill because people actually start avoiding mechanics and dealing with them properly. So what I find often is that at the point of the kill, your HPS is a lot lower than at the start, just because you don't have as many moments where your mastery gets to shine because of people standing and stuff. So I also believe the meters and your scores on it just evolve through progress.
I think it's also it's interesting this and it's definitely true. Like for most bosses, like you can sort of minimize the amount of damage you're taking and make it easier for healers, but like it doesn't really, in my opinion at least, from what I've noticed, and I've been raiding for quite a time, is that back in the good old days, like pretty much several expansions ago, like there was a significant difference on most bosses where you could reduce the amount of damage you took by just being a good player, whereas nowadays it feels like if you fail at mechanics that are key to a fight, like there is no sort of catch up. So it's hard for me to I don't know how to explain it. It's like abilities nowadays are so unforgiving that you either stand in something that you shouldn't, and then you die instantly, and there is no catch-up to that whatsoever, or you just play the fight properly, and there's going to be sort of a predictable damage intake. Like, it isn't so much anymore, in my opinion at least, like the fact that you can sort of get away with you know, unnecessary damage intake. It's a lot more unforgiving. But, I mean, it still exists, for sure.
It really depends on the difficulty you're
Yeah,
playing on. Because if
exactly.
you're a Mythic Raider, yes, you're going to die if you stand in shit that you're not supposed to stand in. But on Heroic and Normal, you can take a few ticks of, say, you can stand in the pool left behind by Reap for a few seconds without dying in Normal and Heroic.
That's a very good point. That's just me being elitist.
That also
Scrap what I just
depends on
said.
gear, though, and on like how much healing that raid can do. So, and the more gear you have, the more HPS you have generally. So, that also depends. If you have a really low geared raid going to normal or heroic mode, standing in Reap, they might actually die to that rather quickly.
There's also the fact that, like, the better your guild is, or like the further you get into bosses, or like the higher the difficulty, the strategies and like the synergy in your raid seems to just, you know, it'll just naturally get higher and higher because that's required out of you to be able to kill these bosses. So later on, like for the better guilds that are sort of reaching into the late heroic bosses and even stepping into mythic, there's going to be more coordination. Like there'll be, you'll have sort of a plan for when exactly to pop cooldowns, like at this certain part during the stack up phase on Gorefiend, or on this pushback last phase Manaroth, for example. So I think, and shamans are very reliant on their cooldowns. Like we have a lot of throughput cooldowns basically to work with. And a lot of this gets dictated by the raid leader or whoever calls this. So in a lot of cases during progression, you don't have a lot of power over who tops the healing. So I don't think you should beat yourself up over the fact that you aren't pushing as much as you'd like to, because in a lot of cases it just comes down to when you're assigned to pop your stuff.
It's also an idea, like if you see that you're really struggling on the meters and you know you could do more because you're not using your cooldowns as much as you could. I mean, if it's a 7-minute fight and you're using healing type ones, try to discuss if there's a better way of using your cooldowns and maybe getting more out of what you have. So
meters have always been the bane for me. I simply despise them as a healer, because as a chamois was pointed out earlier, we can easily, if someone drops low, we can easily heal them up fast. So yeah, there's gonna be, when there's a lot of damage, we're also gonna do a lot of healing, but sometimes we have to make the choice. Okay, I'm gonna do this spread healing, which is gonna be the most healing per second, or do I save this one guy who's on fire or standing in fire and so on? And that's why I think that we should save the guy. I mean, we might not top meters, but we keep everyone alive. I mean, if we can complete a fight with no one dying, then I know I done my job.
Yeah, and you can't really compare classes on a healing meter. I mean, if you're going to look on the healing meter and see, oh, the disc priest is number 1 and you're on the last healer in the group, I mean, you can't just compare healers like that. It's just impossible, because healers are built differently and have different potentials, and you're just going to have to look at the group as a whole to determine how you're going to be able to be on the healing meter, especially as a Resto Shaman, because if you build the group super safe by bringing a lot of healers, you can't do a lot as a Resto Shaman, because you are going to have a lot of shields from Priest and Paladins, and you're going to have a lot of like slow ticking healing from Druids and Monks that's going to be there constantly. So the remaining healing for you is going to be very minimal, actually.
There's also like the problem with I think it's pretty hard, or it's a lot harder to determine how much value they're in looking at your HPS compared to a DPS, because it's pretty rare, regardless of what level you're playing at, and that's raid sizes, is that there's generally just one of each healing spec, so you can't compare yourself to the exact same kind of players. Like, I don't have another Restoration Shaman in the guild or during any boss fights where I can compare myself. Whereas we have several warlocks or several mages or several hunters, so it gets a bit tricky compared to a DPS.
And I also think that that's what made this whole project that we've done with chainheal.com so special is we put down these shamans together and we just discussed, okay, how have you experienced this fight? And what would you say is the trick to this phase? And that was just so insightful and so much fun. So that's definitely the value of what we've been doing together lately.
Yeah, I would I would say about healing meters that like when you are part of the guild and like your healing team is working together like for many tiers, like you pretty much expect what every healer can bring to the raid. You know, like you're capable of doing healing, but on progress, like your main goal is just to go through the fight, covering all the parts of the fight and just killing the boss, really. Like healing meters does not matter at all. But on pugs and like when people are trying to get into the pugs, like people just look blindly on SCADA, and sadly, like in heroics, in normals, like shamans really do not shy.
I think you have kind of the same issue in some mythic guilds.
Well, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, where they're overstacking healers.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but problem is the people don't understand the value of the shaman, and like in most mythic guilds, like I don't think on progress, like on many fights, shaman will be on top. But this tier at least, like we had a permanent spot on every fight because of our cooldowns.
It does seem like it's very much reliant upon the group you're in and whether or not they realise your value. But so we've pretty much covered the fact that you can't use healing meters to determine the value of any healer compared to any other healer. But what techniques would you use to, to basically evaluate healers and Restoration Shaman, generally? Like, what would you do, say, from a raid leader perspective, to, say, okay, I know that, for instance, this Resto Shaman is good because they are doing this.
Well, obviously, as you said, like, you can't judge someone by their HPS unless something is just blatantly wrong. Like, if your Restoration Shaman is pushing close to negative numbers, then obviously there is something wrong. Like, there can't be too much of a discrepancy. But I think if you're a raid leader and you're not familiar with Restoration Shamans, like how to determine if it's a good play or not, is what I tried to sort of touch on during the first question, but I realized now that what I said made no sense whatsoever, is that you just have to look at the mechanical aspects of sort of the fight or the game. If the person, as long as he's doing all right on numbers and he's not dying to mechanics and he's just generally a solid player in terms of survivability, then everything's like all screen, in my opinion.
Well, would you guys say that, for example, the ability to get proper healing tides off is an ability that can be praised in a good Resto Shaman? Not obviously when it's pre-scheduled at a point where we're barely taking damage. I mean, then you can't really judge someone for it. But when a lot of times when bosses are on farm or like somewhat easy progress in normal or heroic, cooldowns are rather free for all. So for someone to actually really get something out of his cooldowns and use that smartly, I think is sometimes a way to spot that someone knows what the class is about.
I think it would be hard for a raid leader to determine how good a Resto Shaman is. Because if you don't know the class and you're going to determine just by looking at logs how good a Resto Shaman is, you're gonna want a lot of knowledge about how our spells work and how we want to prioritize them. And also with the cooldowns that we want to use them on parts where we can't get sniped by a monk or a trank. Because you can utilize our minor cooldowns way differently. Like, Riptide has to be used on cooldown, and Healing Stream has to be used on cooldown. Healing Rain, I mean, it's very dependent on the fight and where, how much damage the group is going to take. So, I mean, by looking at, and Earth Shields, but by looking at how they use their spells, I mean, it's a good way to determine if they know what they're doing, in my opinion.
It mostly can be seen only on logs, pretty much. So you really need to analyze logs, and you need to see if he's doing something wrong. Is he's trying, but there is just not much to heal, or he's just completely FK mode and doing nothing.
Yeah.
Also, like you see in situations where raid kinda fuck up something, and then there is suddenly a lot of damage, or like the shaman can really carry those moments with their burst healing if they react really fast.
There is the Spirit Link, and with Totemic Projection, you can really do a lot of tricks. And I think if someone shows good awareness with how to deal with Spirit Link and how to be creative with that.
For all classes at the moment, like difference between like really good player and average player is basically in positioning during the fights, mainly positioning and understanding of the fights, really. Because like I don't think it's so hard to understand the way the healing actually works, but your gameplay is like the most important, and that's how you can see who's good and who's not.
That's the thing with Shemis. We are an utility box, and if we don't use all the tools, you can. Then what are we worth? I mean, you can look at a healer. Does he dispel? Does he interrupt? Does he do those when you see someone dropping low, instantly heal them up with ancestral swiftness and so on? We have the tools, and we just gotta use them. And if we don't, then might as well roll a paladin.
As I said, it's a lot easier when you're part of the guild than when you just join random pug group, and like those people don't even most of the time look at that stuff, and they just see the healing. Oh, this guy's bad, and they either remove you or you have problems to join the group.
Yeah, if you're in a pug and there's a lot of healers for the group size, I mean, Mythic, 20 people, usually 4 healers. If it exceeds that, then you're probably going to struggle as a Resto Shaman, because you're not going to drop as low, and there's not going to be as much to heal, and your mastery is not going to be able to do as much as it could. So don't beat yourself up over that.
And most of the time you just don't have time to explain to the guy what's going on, and he'll just ask you why you're low on healing, and yeah, then you need wall of text to explain why is that happening.
It's a very unfortunate situation. It definitely seems like the Restoration Shaman gets stronger as you get into a more kind of structured environment.
Yeah, definitely.
But
Yeah, I'd say so too.
But yes, moving on, let's discuss now what I feel is one of the most important tools for a healer, and that is your user interface. Now, modifying your user interface has become incredibly popular over WoW's lifetime, to the point where most raiders are kind of expected to have lots of modifications to their UI. So my question is, what is, in your opinion, the most important aspect of a user interface as a Resto Shaman?
That's also changed. Like it's been stuff that weren't before has become like pretty much mandatory, but it isn't so much shaman specific stuff. Like I don't know of a lot of like sort of high end or even like decent guilds that don't require, like, consider it mandatory for you to have WeakAuras, for example. It's like pretty much every single fight is being simplified by WeakAuras and boss mods of any sort. So I mean, that's definitely mandatory. As for the UI setup, like your personal setup, it's like I think we're seeing a lot of like different setups from, like, I know a lot of high-end healers that use the standard healing frames. So I personally think, but it's probably because I swapped away, because I obviously before Blizzard made the change to their own healing bars or health bars, you pretty much didn't have an option. You just had to get like something like Grid or Healbot. But right now, it's like there's really nothing wrong with going with the Blizzard standard frames. There are some things you're going to miss out on, like tracking externals that aren't yours, tank cooldowns, and on some boss fights, actually, in this tier, it's become pretty relevant and pretty convenient to be able to track the amount of absorbs you have on specific people, namely on Manoroth, for example, for the Curse of Doom. On Mythic, for example, you want to make sure that you let your Discipline Priest, or whatever it is, put a shield onto the person that you're dispelling if you're assigned to that. Otherwise, you'll just insta-give that person. And the standard healing frames doesn't provide that, so...
Yeah, I think so.
There is, like...
I also think, in general, the standard UI shows debuffs very well. If you install something else and you don't know how to properly configure it for a new raid, you might miss out on certain new debuffs.
You need to manually add most of the time if you're using Grid.
So
that it can be messed up if you're not sure what you're doing.
Exactly. So I actually started using Blizzard's rate frames again. You can move it around. You can alter it. There's all sorts of settings for it, and you can even modify it with external add-ons again. But it does show it very well at the moment, I think. And yeah, I would have said the debuffs exactly for dispelling and all. It's just very clear. So I like it.
That's the thing. I mean, you don't need shaman specific add-ons anymore because WeakAuras, for example, can handle anything that back at the times you need an add-on to track lots of things. Now you do it with either the boss mod or you do it with WeakAuras.
Well, I do feel like, for example, a little bit more shaman specific. You have your totems. You want to be able to cancel your totem because you can revoke it. You can sort of like just click it away or and see uptimes of them, like how many seconds there still is until they end.
But a WeakAuras can also do that.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
No, but we're talking about like what are important aspects of a UI, and I'd say that it's quite important to see for how long your totems are still ticking and to be able to maybe remove them prematurely.
In case anyone is running with Cloudburst Totem.
No, like Windwalk, maybe you want to manage it and like stop it, or
It's also helpful for knowing when your capacitor totem is about to explode.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, indeed.
I think not mandatory, but something that adds a lot of convenience is a tracker for your Spirit Walker's Grace with that. Well, that goes into WeakAuras obviously, but just put specific trackers on utility cooldowns such as Spirit Walkers or duration of your current healing rain if you're running conductivity, or the remaining duration of your Ascendance, for example. I have that in like numbers displays just on top of my healing frame, so I can track all of that.
Yeah, the most important thing is just that you have a perfect overview of what's ready, what's going to be ready, and what uptimes do you have on certain buffs.
And you also want to be aware of incoming damage, so the timers of abilities that are about to hit are good to have in your sight as well. Because if you install DBM, it's often like very far to the side by default. And what you see a lot with the raiders in higher rank guilds is that they've centered it a little bit more around the character to be able to see it quicker.
Now, this question is something that I've recently thought of because earlier in this guide, I was discussing the value of Echo of the Elements, and of course, having 2 Spirit Link totems is very big on a lot of fights. However, Chain Heal themselves actually convinced me via the website to try out Ancestral Swiftness, which is the passive 5% bonus haste and the instant cast nature spell with a cooldown. So I'd actually like to ask you guys what your thoughts on Echo of the Elements versus Ancestral Swiftness are, because I know that Echo of the Elements is a very safe pick because it gives you more options in general. So what does Ancestral Swiftness offer in comparison to that, and when should you consider taking it?
I think it's a very fight-dependent choice to make, and also a choice you should make as a player, because Echo of the Elements is going to add a bit more. It's going to be better for people who are not that good at using the Riptides on cooldown, because you have several charges, so you're always going to, or you're not going to miss out on so many Riptides, because Ancestral Swiftness pretty much requires you to use Riptide on cooldown to get the maximum value.
I agree with Keen, like pretty much what he just said. Like it's dictated by the fight you're on. Like so whatever fight basically that doesn't require me to have 2 quick successive Spirit Links, I'll go Ancestral Swiftness. I really like Ancestral Swiftness, by the way. What it adds in comparison to Echo is just higher throughput, just general throughput, and a little bit of convenience with the instant spell.
Yeah, and it can be used for almost anything. I mean, you can use it to snipe heals, or you can use it to plan ahead, like throw a healing rain on the spot where you know the group is about to move.
Okay, fantastic. I was about to ask, what do you find yourselves using Ancestral Swiftness, the actual cooldown, with most? I mean, do you use it for double chain heal or healing rain, or do you just find yourself using it for a variety of spells?
It tends to be, in my case, it's as the fight goes on and we get more and more attempts into a boss, like I sort of get the feeling of when I want to have these. I tend to actually plan out my Ancestral Swiftness casts uses, like, so I use them more as a convenience or a throughput boost thing more than like an oh shit button. I feel that the value of this ability as an oh shit button has sort of decreased with the decrease of your actual healing that you do compared to health bars right now.
I feel like the double charge as a Spirit Link is a better oh shit button than the Ancestral Swift instant cast. So if you're gonna use it, if you're gonna need those oh shit buttons, you might want to go with the double Spirit Link.
Oh, totally. It's in general though. In my case, it's I always try to play out the fight with Ancestral Swiftness, and then it's basically just the fight that dictates it, or Tech, my healing officer, that says I need 2 Spirit Links, and I'll be like, but please, and he'll be like, come on, do it, and I'll be like, okay.
Yeah, like your raid leader most of the time is just telling you, oh, you have those 2 links, yeah? Like, they don't give you a choice most of the time. For a start, I don't even understand why Ancestral Swiftness is not our basic spell. I don't know, for me it doesn't make sense that we need to spec into it. And yeah, especially in this tier, I think that Echo of Elements was a lot better on pretty much all end bosses, apart from Archimond, where Swiftness is probably better because there is no really spot for a double link there.
For sure. Like Manaroth specifically, that's a lot of convenience going Echo in that fight, because there's a lot of not unpredictable, but some overlaps can be more brutal than they generally are. Like it varies from attempt to attempt pretty much, so it's really handy to have double link there.
So, to finish off this this section, I'd like to just ask you, do you actually have any pieces of advice for Restoration Shaman out there? Just any tips or tricks you've learned as you've progressed throughout your careers as Resto Shaman? Just stuff that you've noticed?
I don't know, I think I'd just like to basically just say what I did during the first part of this, is that, and I'm sorry for just spacing out there, but it's really just, for me, it just comes down to just being an all-around good player. Just play the fight, like play the fight mechanics properly, and it should work out. I can't really give any specifics as to how to be good at a Resto Shaman, like maybe someone else can. I just feel that it's important to just focus on the mechanics of the fight and just make sure you're casting stuff.
I guess if you want to talk about Hellfire Citadel specifically, I think there's one thing that surprised me a lot in our talks was the use of Spirit Walker's focus, and how that seems to align very well with a lot of moments during Hellfire Citadel encounters.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare that you have moments where you have to run for more than 7 seconds at a time. So having that decreased cooldown is going to help you out a lot, since you can move more frequently from stuff that you're going to take damage from.
And additionally, there's Windwalk and Earth Grab. There's a lot of uses of Windwalk in this instance, which I love, being the one who can solve that. Like there's Gorefiend, there's Sokrathar, there's even Manaroth if you really want to have the raid killed.
Of them get out of the slow thingy once push is over.
Yeah, that too. And even on Sokrathar, you could say, okay, I'm going Earth Grab, if I'm not confusing them, to help out with the ghosts, right, King?
Yeah, I was forced to do that during progress because we didn't really have the DPS to kill them instantly, and we didn't really have the stuns and roots otherwise to keep them locked there until they were dead. So I was forced to use Earth Grab together with Totemic Projection to root them as they exited the portal.
Another thing would be to just generally, and this goes for pretty much any encounter, unless you know that you're going to be running for quite some time, just try and getting to the habit of relying on your Unleash Life instead of always popping Ghost Wolf, since it essentially silences you.
Yeah, and you should never use Unleash Life in a stationary situation. It's just a HPS decrease. You're only going to want to use it when you have to move, and you need the movement speed.
Even at that point, like, sometimes it's better to just run and do Riptides on raid. But yeah, Unleash Life only when moving.
I think the best advice I can give is like, don't be afraid to switch talents. It's not like the old system where you had to redo a whole tree. This is the most flexible talent systems we have currently. So like when we discuss which talent is better, well, it depends on the fight. So don't be afraid to switch around depending on which boss you're going on.
And also stack spirit infinitely. Like if you're in a progressing guild right now and you're not on farm, just really grab all the spirit that's available to you. In my opinion, like you can never get enough spirit. And I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's like, I guess you could go with rings like jewelry and stuff for increased secondary stats, but it's not really going to have any significant make any significant changes to your throughput. So it's really just better to stack up in spirit, to know that you can afford to just not think about what abilities you're casting during certain part of fights. Just makes it a lot easier. So just don't think about trying to figure out this sort of sweet spot in terms of spirit. Just get all the spirit you can get, really.
Do we want to say anything about grounding totem?
It's very good on Solarac.
Yeah, I have a habit when I first get into a raid for the first time. I just try and keep grounding totem up as much as I can and just see what I can do. Like, for instance, I didn't know for the longest time that on Siege of Orgrimmar, you could reflect the Froststorm bolt back into the shaman's face. That was awesome.
Well, also on Blackhand, the fire patches that came down on Blackhand could be absorbed as well. So there's lots of little niche things that not many people mention. So don't be afraid to either read up what it can ground or try it out yourself. I mean, it's just pop it and see what happens.
Yes, well, that's going to conclude this section. And before we finish, I would just like to quickly mention that everyone here is other than myself, is a member of chainheal.com, and this website is basically all about the Restoration Shaman. They have mythic-only guides for the Restoration Shaman, suggestions for what talents to use, what to use in what situations. They've got best in slot lists, they've got talent choices, all kinds of different things. And I would definitely suggest, if you are passionate about the Restoration Shaman, and let's be honest, if you've watched this video for the last 2 odd hours, no doubt you are passionate about the Restoration Shaman, I would definitely suggest going to chainheal.com and seeing what they and the community that they are starting to build, because they are quite a young site, what kind of they have to say, because they are some of the best Restoration Shaman around, and they will definitely offer all kinds of different advice. So I will include a link to chainheal.com in the description, although it can't be that difficult to remember. It is an amazing name. So yes, that's definitely a resource I would suggest. And I would like to take a moment to thank you all very much for agreeing to get involved in this guide. And the stuff I've heard you say has been amazing and incredibly helpful. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for wanting to listen to us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
You can also come to our website if you have any questions. We usually get back to you rather quickly, so if you want to know anything, don't be shy to come ask us a question.
Okay, now let's move on. Okay, to wrap things up, let's discuss your main goal. Your main goal as a Restoration Shaman. What do you think it is? Just take a second to figure it out. What is your goal? Now, if you've seen my guides before, then you likely know the answer to this. But if you haven't, chances are you may have said your goal is to be a healer. Perhaps to support the team, or to offer utility. Nope. It's really quite simple when you think about it. Your goal, in the entirety of every raid you are in, is to be a raider. It's that simple. No strings attached. Be a raider. Heal to the best of your ability. Use your utilitarian spells. Help the team figure out fights. Be the guy on voice chat who knows the fights, who can offer advice, who can say, yeah, I can do that. I can root those ads. I can bloodlust. I can slow that guy. I can handle this burst of damage. Then this one, and then this one. Be the guy who people turn to for advice. Be the member of the raid team that supports everyone, and if you're not there, the raid team is weaker. That is how it should be, regardless of your role. And one last piece of advice, you see that healing meter? Throw it out of the window. It is not necessary. It is not a measure of how well you are doing. Do well by keeping the damn raid alive. Be a hero. Laugh, chat, and play with the people that you raid with. Make the raids enjoyable for everyone around you. And be the guy that everyone wants to raid with. Because with your knowledge, skill, determination to constantly improve, and your ability to step out of your comfort zone, people will beg you to stay as a Restoration Shaman. The people that disagree, that think that the healing meters are everything and that their toolkit is only for healing and there's nothing else, they are one of three things. Ignorant, stupid, or just an asshole. Be a great raider. That is the most important piece of advice any guide can give you, ever. Be friendly, responsible, and awesome, and regardless of your class, you will be an asset to your raid. Master your spells through hours of practice, and develop a responsible and effective knowledge of your class. Use your support abilities, more than just your healing spells, as much as you can, because they're all going to be very, very helpful as you progress, and who knows, that extra 1 million damage might be the difference between a kill and a 1% wipe. Finally, enjoy yourself. You're in a game. Master it if you can, but always, always enjoy yourself. Surround yourself with people that you like to raid with, who will listen to your terrible jokes, who will chat and laugh with you throughout the evening, enjoy all of your wonderful spells, and most importantly, enjoy your time in the World of Warcraft. That's it for this guide. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, or feedback, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can feel free to just leave a comment. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck as the restorative master of shamanistic healing.